the Admiral of Hogwarts. Greetings, fellow multiversal adventurers. It's an honor to have you back in this saga that has us all hooked. Official channel statement: this story is 100% epic fiction, so please don't attempt real magic. The results aren't guaranteed and insurance won't cover it. The rights to this masterpiece belong entirely to its brilliant original author. We are just a barge sharing it with you. Do you want to keep being part of this amazing community? Join our ninja army of subscribers on YouTube and give this content a like. And for true fans, our Patreon has exclusive ninjutsu waiting for you. Chapter 201 Valentine and Chapter X27, Day Horror. The decorations in the Great Hall on Valentine's Day could be said to have completely shattered Hugo's bottom line on aesthetics, because the originally solemn white marble walls were covered with large, dazzling pink flowers. To make matters worse, countless heart-shaped confetti kept falling from the light blue ceiling. After carefully removing a few pieces of confetti from his milk with a fork, Hugo immediately started eating a sandwich with the milk. The charlatan is indeed a charlatan, but being able to achieve this level must mean he has some special skills, Hermione said, giving Lockhart his first positive evaluation since returning from the United States, as she looked at the transformed Great Hall. Sure enough, compared to the boys who looked disgusted, the girls still preferred this romantic arrangement that seemed to be bubbling with pink bubbles. Even Hermione, who knew Lockhart's true colors, was no exception. However, when Lockhart appeared on the stage wearing a pink outfit that symbolized the same sexual orientation as Dumbledore in England, Hugo simply grabbed his half-eaten sandwich and left the Great Hall because he really didn't want to watch what Lockhart was about to do next, even though he felt embarrassed enough to dig his toes into the ground when he read about it in his previous life. What are these things? Hermione, who also didn't want to listen to Lockhart, came out at this time, and then pointed to a group of leprechauns passing by them and asked, "Leprechauns, I think the books we read before should have introduced them," Hugo replied, but he also realized what his sister wanted to ask when he spoke. As for the golden wings on their bodies and the harps in their hands, they should be decorations Lockhart gave them, probably wanting to imitate Cupid. I really don't know if Lockhart's aesthetics are the problem, or if the aesthetics of the entire wizarding world are the problem. Hermione shook her head helplessly after listening to Hugo's guess for a whole day. The dwarves kept breaking into their classrooms, delivering Valentine's Day cards, which annoyed the teachers to no end at the same time. Because these dwarves were really a bit muddle-headed, the romantic love confessions they created were more like a public execution in some sense to the recipients. Under such circumstances, these leprechauns hired by Lockhart quickly became an existence hated by the vast majority of teachers and students. But there were still a small number of students with different ideas or who wanted to stir up trouble who kept supporting these leprechauns running around. In just one morning, Veneto received no less than 10 love letters or musical messages. The reason for this situation was that even if the ship girls consciously tried to make themselves look ugly, they still stood out from the crowd. Therefore, many people, even if they could see Veneto's affection for Hugo, would try to send her a love letter during such an opportunity. Veneto basically responded to these love letter senders with a smile. After all, for the wizards in England, marriage partners were basically found among these fellow students, so campus romance was a very common thing. Therefore, under this background, although she was a little unhappy in her heart, she could understand the thoughts of those hormone-filled guys, so she politely accepted or listened to those letters in public. But after class, she naturally threw the received items into the trash can to show her attitude. In the afternoon, Hugo and the others were planning to go to the classroom on the third floor for class when they saw a small figure running over quickly from a distance. At first, Hugo thought this was another guy planning to send a love letter to Veneto, but after that guy ran closer, Hugo didn't hear him singing or reciting those clumsy poems, but instead let out a scream full of fear. "Dead, dead." The little leprechaun kept shouting this word, and then ran quickly towards the Great Hall. "Is the basilisk coming?" Hugo asked Veneto through the Admiral network, while subconsciously drawing his wand and taking half a step forward. "Don't worry, my Admiral. There are no traces of any large animals passing by around," Veneto assured Hugo confidently. "So either this guy is making a fuss, or something did pass by here, but it has already left." The little leprechaun scream alarmed many people, but before Hugo and the others had time to decide whether to go and see the excitement, a professor came out to clean up the mess, so they could only go to class as usual. What exactly happened? After sitting down in the classroom, Hugo asked Enterprise through the Admiral network. "Did someone unfortunately die?" "Of course not, my dear Commander." In a classroom upstairs, Enterprise said to Hugo while examining the corpse in her hand with a serious face, "The deceased is a school owl." According to the examination, it can be determined that this owl was not injured or poisoned, as if its soul suddenly left its body. How is it? Did you find anything? After watching Enterprise complete the examination and hand the dead owl in her hand to Snape, Dumbledore looked at Enterprise with his blue eyes and asked, "The basic examination has been completed." Enterprise nodded and said, "At least according to the current situation, there are only two possible causes of death for this owl. Either it was hit by a killing curse, or it was the unknown monster in the Chamber of Secrets." After listening to Enterprise's words, Headmaster Dumbledore nodded, and then stood there quietly again. And a few minutes later, Snape also came to a conclusion similar to Enterprise's. "Albus, you must know, who, Professor McGonagall, who as the oldest person present besides the headmaster and also knew a lot about the school, said after listening to Enterprise and Snape's analysis, the question is not who." Dumbledore's eyes stayed on the soft dead owl, and said, "The question is, how." The other professors present were all confused after listening to Professor McGonagall and Headmaster Dumbledore's conversation. But Enterprise knew exactly what these two senior professors were talking about because the way this owl died was too similar to the cause of Moaning Myrtle's death back then. But back then there was still young Voldemort to suspect. But now, even Dumbledore is not sure what this attack is all about. After a few seconds of silence, the headmaster asked the professors to leave. And he returned to the headmaster's office and reported this new attack to the Ministry of Magic and the school board as required for Hugo. His most direct feeling about this attack was that all the leprechauns disappeared after the attack, which made his ears a lot quieter. However, after the news of the owl's death spread, the atmosphere in the school became tense again in a very short period of time. Those amulets and magical defense tools that had disappeared before reappeared on everyone's bodies then, starting from some day after the attack. A rumor that Hagrid was the mastermind behind the scenes began to circulate in the school. Chapter 202 Rumors and Truth. Can anyone tell me where this idea that Hagrid was the culprit originally came from? While studying various dueling techniques in the room of requirement over the weekend, Hermione, during a break, posed a question that had been swirling in her mind all week to the two ship girls and her brother, although it might sound disrespectful. Based on what I've read about Slytherin in my history books, I don't think Hagrid is qualified to be his heir. This is a very long story. Are you sure you want to hear it? After hearing Hermione's question, Firefly and Hugo exchanged a glance and then said to her, "After that owl died, I specifically asked someone to check the Ministry of Magic's records, and it turned out that the records showed that the monster in the Chamber of Secrets had been released once nearly 50 years ago." Seeing everyone nod, Firefly began to tell the story of 50 years ago to the three people in the room. In that attack, a Ravenclaw girl named Myrtle Elizabeth Warren unfortunately died in the bathroom. Hagrid was identified as the culprit and expelled from Hogwarts. "You mean someone died?" Hermione exclaimed, her eyes widening. "But I checked the school records before, and there was never any mention of this. Actually, I initially wanted to check these records at the school, but like you, I couldn't find any records of this incident." Firefly shrugged. Fortunately, Hood found someone to get some relevant information from the Ministry of Magic. According to a file from the Ghost Office under the Department for the Regulation and Control of Magical Creatures, Myrtle Elizabeth Warren became a ghost after her death and kept harassing Olive Hornby. This problem wasn't resolved until they intervened with a warning. After matching the date of discovery and the name, Hood checked the public records of other departments of the Ministry of Magic and found the file about erasing the memories of the Muggle Warren couple regarding their daughter and the Accidental Magic Reversal Squad's records from that year. Through the scattered content recorded in those files, we can finally roughly reconstruct what happened during that monster attack back then. As for why this news is circulating now, I can understand it. After all, given the lifespan of wizards, there should be quite a few people still alive who experienced that attack. So, theoretically, when their grandchildren tell them what happened at school, these old people are likely to tell the children about what happened back then, and then the news will spread throughout the entire castle. Erasing the Warrens' memories, is that really true? After listening to Firefly's account, Hermione immediately seized on one of the issues she was concerned about and asked, just like that, the Warrens forgot that they had a daughter who unfortunately died after going to a wizarding school, as if she had never existed. That's exactly right. According to the records in the files, this is done to prevent those muggles from blaming the magical world after the death of their relatives and exposing the existence of the magical world. Firefly shook her head and said, "At least I think that sometimes sacrificing the interests of a few people is unavoidable for the sake of the safety of the entire magical world. However, the practice of only giving 300 galleons in compensation, as recorded in the file, is really terrible. The purchasing power of currency in the wizarding world is much more stable than that of currency in the ordinary world, so the compensation given to them by the wizarding world after Myrtle's death back then is equivalent to about £1,500 in today's purchasing power. Obviously, this price is too low for a human life. However, according to the Ministry of Magic standard that has not changed for centuries, this is the only compensation for the accidental death of a Muggle-born wizard at school. Everyone gathered together and criticized the Ministry of Magic's impersonal approach for a long time, but this criticism was only based on their own sense of shared hatred as Muggle-born wizards communicating good books. Follow the VX public account, Book Friends Base Camp. Follow now to receive cash red envelopes, because they all knew that they couldn't change anything with their current status. After venting their emotions for a while, Hermione, who had calmed down, suddenly seemed to think of something and said, "By the way, since that Miss Warren has become a ghost, then we can ask her what the monster in the Chamber of Secrets is. But where should we go to find her now? Myrtle is not a common name, and ghosts tend to linger in the places that hold the deepest memories for them in life, so, she is the ghost in the girls' bathroom on the first floor," moaning Myrtle. Before Firefly could finish selling the secret, Hermione guessed the ghost's identity. Hermione couldn't sit still now, so she quickly persuaded Veneto and Firefly to go to the first floor together to find moaning Myrtle, while Hugo, being a boy, was left in the room of requirement to wait for news. More than 20 minutes later, the door of the room of requirement opened, and Hermione walked in from outside with a frustrated expression. "Didn't you get any information, Hugo?" Who was deducing a certain knowledge point of ancient runes on the parchment, asked without looking up. "Is Myrtle not there today?" "No, Myrtle is there, and we also asked the question we wanted to ask." Hermione walked to the cushion and sat down directly, then said, "But the conclusion we got is not very helpful to us. According to that ghost, she only saw a pair of large yellow eyes like light bulbs back then, and then felt as if her whole body was grabbed, and then she just died like that." Veneto added from behind, "We checked the location where she said the eyes appeared, but we didn't find anything unusual. The entire bathroom, apart from being a bit old, is no different from other bathrooms. Are you sure you didn't make a mistake? Theoretically, shouldn't there be a small snake carved on the side of a copper faucet?" Hugo, pretending to be listening carefully to his sister and the others, asked Veneto through the Admiral network. "Yes, theoretically, there should be such a carving on one of those faucets, but we turned around and didn't find that faucet at the time. What's even more interesting is that those brass faucets all have traces of being polished just these few days, and there is also a layer of dust sprinkled on them specifically." Firefly also interjected into the communication at this time and said what she had just seen. "If we didn't know about that mechanism in advance, we would only think that this is a very ordinary pool. And we wouldn't realize that this place is the exit of the Chamber of Secrets, just been polished. It seems that the person who got that Horcrux this time is a bit smarter than we thought," Hugo said after thinking for a few seconds. "Obviously, whether it's polishing off the carvings on the faucet or spreading rumors, there is actually only one purpose, and that is to muddy the waters in the school and then hide oneself." This failure made Hermione a little frustrated, but soon, she thought of a backup plan. "I think we can ask Hagrid what the situation is when we have time." If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 203 Easter Holidays. Obviously, being expelled because of someone's death wasn't a glorious thing, so Hugo and the others decided to organize their words carefully these few days and wait until they were ready to go find Hagrid. However, that day after the conversation reached this point, Hermione began to inquire about what exactly happened with Hagrid's expulsion from school, because in her mind, Hagrid shouldn't be the kind of person who would deliberately kill someone. According to the records left by the Ministry of Magic, Hagrid was only listed as a suspect in that murder case, but he was not convicted, Firefly said, stating the information Hood had searched, and the reason he was expelled was because he was raising a necromantula, a magical creature classified as XXXXX by the Ministry of Magic, in the school, and this point has been confirmed and was not a frame-up. That does sound like something Hagrid would do. Our big-headed friend always has a different perception of magical creatures than normal people, Veneto said, spreading her hands. When I helped him revise that notebook last year, I discovered this point. He used words like cute or alluring to describe many fierce beasts, If that's the case, Hagrid's expulsion from school wasn't unjustified. Hermione, who had flipped through all the Wizarding World's laws, pursed her lips after hearing Firefly's words, then looked helpless, because for the act of privately raising a XXXXX-level magical creature, the law can sentence the breeder to life imprisonment in Azkaban at most. More importantly, Hagrid was secretly raising man-eating Ackermanchulas in a place like Hogwarts, Hugo quickly added. Considering the threat to the surrounding young wizards, Hagrid being expelled can be said to be a lenient punishment. Since the discussion in the Room of Requirement ended that time, the days passed by like that. Almost everyone thought that the next attack would come soon, but until the Easter holiday arrived, everything was still quiet for Hugo. The biggest gain during this period, in addition to slowly mastering the usage of ancient runes, was that Hermione's understanding of information caused a deviation in the plot, allowing Hugo to gain some destiny points. Perhaps because of these days of peace, it seemed that almost everyone thought that the attacker, whoever he was, had quit for good. Peeves had finally grown tired of singing his song "No, Potter, you nasty little faker." And Harry also told Hugo and the others during a library study session that everyone was now willing to interact with him again. Even better news came from Professor Sprout. In March, she told everyone in class that several mandrakes had opened a lively and noisy ball in Greenhouse 3. That is to say, as long as they waited for a very short period of time, these mandrakes would be able to complete the final transplant and then be brewed into a potion to rescue those who had been petrified. However, all of this was not the most important thing for Hugo and the other second-year students, because the Easter holiday was coming, and Hugo and the others had to choose their third-year elective courses. This course selection will be related to our future, so I think we must consider and make choices very carefully. In the Ravenclaw common room, Hermione said with a serious face to Hugo, who was sitting opposite her, Okay, I know the importance of course selection, but sis, you've said this 5 times today. Hugo looked at his course list with a helpless expression and analyzed. As an admiral, Hugo would naturally not have any employment pressure in the future, so he chose courses purely according to his interests. However, Hermione's ideas were different from Hugo's, because she believed that since she had come to this magical world, she naturally couldn't miss any opportunity to learn magic. Unlike Gryffindor, after the third-year elective course schedule was sent to the second-year students, the Ravenclaw upperclassmen began to guide these younger students on how to choose courses, and also told everyone some tips that needed to be mastered in the course selection. By the way, sis, what courses have you decided to choose? A few minutes later, Hugo broke the silence and asked Hermione, I plan to choose all the courses except for divination. Although if I choose courses like this, potions will conflict with Muggle studies one day. The upperclassmen said that the school has a way to solve this problem. Speaking of this, Hermione took Hugo's course schedule and looked at it, then nodded with satisfaction. Because Hugo chose only one less course than her, Muggle studies, which showed that Hugo was indeed choosing courses according to his needs, and not just for ease. Although the mainstream of education in Europe and the United States is traditionally so-called happy education, this kind of education is only aimed at young people from grassroots families. For middle-class or above families, their requirements for their children are no lower than those of the Northeast Asian countries. The Granger siblings came from a family of dentists, which meant that their family belonged to the top part of the middle class, so they naturally wouldn't relax on their children's education. At least in Hugo's memory, he and his sister had taken many kinds of extracurricular classes when they were young, so they were admitted to famous private high schools after graduating from elementary school. So as a sister, Hermione naturally felt obliged to check her younger brother's choices at this time. Fortunately, the results of the inspection were very good. Hugo did not relax himself in terms of academics. Sis, why do you want to choose Muggle studies? At this moment, Hugo also took the opportunity to raise his own question. Haven't you found that those textbooks are full of a lot of fallacies? But I think it's very important to see how wizards view ordinary people, because it allows me to understand the real differences between the two worlds. Speaking of this question, Hermione immediately became serious. You need to know that according to my observation, the wizarding world has always had an inexplicable sense of superiority over the ordinary world, and this sense of superiority naturally brings about worse racism and discrimination that permeates the entire magical world, and if you want to change all of this, then it's more appropriate to start from one of the roots of these problems, the wizard's perception of ordinary people. So I think I should study the content of this course. Of course, I don't plan to study this course for too long. I just plan to take this opportunity to collect information, so I will most likely only attend it for 1 year next year. To be honest, if you don't need to consider the difficulty of learning, course selection is actually a very simple thing, at least according to the information Hugo inquired from the upperclassmen. Anyone who chooses ancient runes and arithmancy and can pass the exams will definitely not have any major problems in future employment, because compared to divination, care of magical creatures, and Muggle studies, the wizarding world believes that ancient runes and arithmancy can better reflect the level of a wizard. Firefly and Veneto chose the same courses as Hugo in terms of course selection, because they didn't have any particular favorite or expertise in these elective courses, so they believed that choosing the same courses as the Admiral in this situation was naturally the best choice, because it would allow them to spend more time with the Admiral. Chapter 204 Interlude. In Ravenclaw, not many people could make their third-year course selections as quickly as the Granger siblings or Veneto. Looking at the entire Hogwarts castle, one would find that for most young wizards, choosing courses could take a long time and involve a very complex process. Muggle-born wizards like Hugo and his friends might need to ask older students, or even professors, and then use their own methods to choose their elective courses for the following year. As for wizards from wizarding families, it was even more troublesome. For example, Neville Longbottom received letters from relatives almost every day during the holidays, all containing suggestions about course selection, and he wasn't the only one with such a case. However, by the end of the Easter holidays, all the second-year students had successfully completed their course selections and submitted their forms to the professors of their respective houses. After the holidays, everything returned to normal, and it was at this time that the Weasley twins suddenly approached Hugo. "I remember the first game after the break should be you guys against Hufflepuff, right? You must be busy with training lately. Why do you suddenly have time to find me today?" After leaving with Hermione and Veneto, who were taking the same class, Hugo asked the Weasley brothers, who had found him at the classroom door. After they came to an empty classroom because of their previous cooperation, Hugo and the Weasley twins had a pretty good relationship. Sometimes they would even get together to discuss interesting things. However, it was not common for them to wait for him at the classroom door like this. "We heard you've been studying ancient runes recently, and you've already started learning how to make runestones. Is that true?" Fred asked immediately after hearing Hugo's words. "Where did you get this news?" Hugo was a little surprised because he didn't remember telling anyone about this, and neither his sister nor Enterprise were the kind of people who would blab. "Of course, it was from Professor Halsey's office. We saw a few runestones there, and she told us it was homework submitted by her apprentice." George shrugged his shoulders, "And Fred and I recognized your and your sister's handwriting in some of the papers next to them, so we wanted to come over today to ask and try our luck." It turned out that the Weasley brothers had only guessed that Hugo had mastered this ability based on some things they had seen in Enterprise's few words, and now they were just asking him to try their luck. However, Hugo didn't think this matter needed to be kept secret, so after being asked by the Weasley twins, he directly admitted it. After Hugo admitted this, the Weasley twins immediately made a request, hoping that Hugo could help them solve some problems they had encountered in their previous research. "I remember that current transfiguration and potions can meet your requirements. Why are you still coming to me?" Hugo asked, a little puzzled, looking at the firework samples placed in front of him. Compared to transfiguration or potions, ancient runes magic involves a lot of knowledge related to alchemy, which makes the cost much higher than before. Obviously, fireworks are consumables, and if runic magic is used on them, the expensive price will probably make it difficult to sell these fireworks. "You're right, but the problem is that Weasley's wizard Wheezes has been developing in traditional ways for too long. So making fireworks in the traditional way would only be a slight modification on his foundation at best." Fred quickly explained his helplessness. "We have indeed made some samples, such as the ones you see now. But compared to the old products, these new products don't have any changes that can make people's eyes light up. Therefore, if we want our fireworks to be known to everyone, then we must make some big changes. And making some top-notch fireworks that Weasley's wizard Wheezes doesn't have is a very good promotional tool." "That's right." George also stepped forward and patted Hugo on the shoulder, saying, "But achieving that kind of effect is not easy. At least, the content of potions, transfiguration, and even charms can hardly solve this problem." As the twins spoke their thoughts one after another, Hugo also gained a lot of meaningful information from them. For example, the twins were indeed lagging behind in exams, mainly because severe subject bias made them ignore a lot of knowledge. In contrast, the Weasley twins could learn very deeply about the content they were interested in. Taking these fireworks as an example, The academic ability shown by the twins in the discussion was something that even some 7th-year students specializing in transfiguration or potions could not match. Obviously, Hugo, who had his skills directly instilled by Odin, might still have many practical problems now, but in theory, he was already no less than many masters, so Hugo quickly came up with a design plan based on the twins' needs. Of course, in order to avoid scaring the twins, he only mentioned a few words about the alchemy and runic content of these problems and certain general directions during this discussion. Even so, the Weasley twins realized Hugo's powerful abilities in this area, which far exceeded his age, so after the discussion, the Weasley twins formally invited Hugo to join their research and be specifically responsible for the alchemy-related content. Hugo naturally agreed to their invitation because this job was not difficult for him at all, and Hugo, who knew the plot well, naturally knew how good the Weasley twins' business prospects were. Apart from this incidental event, everything that followed was very peaceful. Soon, the time for the first game after the holiday arrived. Because this game was Gryffindor against Hufflepuff, the atmosphere in Ravenclaw was very good. Everyone welcomed the game with a sense of enjoying the fun of sports. After finishing breakfast, Hugo and his friends, who were planning to go to the Quidditch pitch early to get a good seat, had just stepped onto the marble staircase when they heard a scream. "What's wrong, Harry?" Hermione, who had been startled by the scream from not far behind them, stepped forward to ask with concern after realizing that the person who screamed was Harry. "No, it's nothing." Harry shook his head lightly after seeing that the person who came to ask was Hermione. "Maybe Wood has been training us too hard these days, making me hallucinate because of fatigue. It's good if you're okay." Looking at Harry, who did look a little tired, all Hugo and his friends could do was step forward and comfort him. The group walked to the outside of the Quidditch pitch together, then said goodbye to each other and went to their respective locations. After finding a good seat in the stands, Hugo contacted Enterprise through the Admiral network as soon as possible. Harry should have heard the basilisk's hiss just now. After contacting Enterprise, Hugo immediately stated the conclusion he had reached after observing just now. "So are you ready on your side?" "I'm already ready. I've deployed my carrier-based aircraft at various key points in the castle." Enterprise's confident voice immediately came from within the Admiral network. "If that guy really makes a move, I will definitely catch him." Chapter 205 New Attacks. After finishing the call with Enterprise, Hugo turned his attention to the Quidditch pitch. Perhaps because the conversation had taken a little longer than expected, the seats around the pitch were now filled with people, who were cheering loudly amidst the deafening cheers. The Quidditch teams from the two houses entered the pitch. Upon entering the pitch, the captains of the Gryffindor and Hufflepuff teams immediately mounted their brooms and soared into the air, circling their respective goalposts as a warm-up, while also making taunting gestures towards the opposing side. Madame Hooch released a balls. The Hufflepuff team members, dressed in pale yellow uniforms, were huddled together, using the last minute to discuss tactics. Just as Harry was about to mount his broom, Hugo suddenly saw Professor McGonagall running across the pitch, holding a giant purple microphone. "It seems something else has happened. Have your carrier-based aircraft found anything?" Seeing Professor McGonagall rushing onto the pitch, Hugo immediately contacted Enterprise, who was staying in the castle, through the Admiral network. "No, I can swear to that." Enterprise's tone was filled with disbelief. "There's absolutely no way I could have missed a creature as big as the basilisk." Here, Enterprise suddenly paused, then explained to Hugo a few seconds later, "Headmaster Dumbledore just used his Phoenix Patronus to notify me to gather in the Great Hall. I'm going to check it out now, and I'll let you know what exactly happened this time after I figure it out." The match has been cancelled. After ending the connection with Enterprise, Hugo saw Professor McGonagall speaking into the microphone towards the crowded open-air stands. The crowd erupted in dissatisfied hisses and shouts. Oliver Wood looked like he wanted to express some disagreement to his head of house, but Professor McGonagall clearly didn't pay him any attention at this time. "All students must return to their respective house common rooms. There, the heads of the houses will tell you more about the situation. Please leave as soon as possible." Professor McGonagall's expression was serious, and her tone brooked no argument. The Ravenclaws returned to the tower's common room, and then each found familiar companions to discuss what had just happened. A tense atmosphere quickly permeated the room. Soon, the small Professor Flitwick, with a serious face, climbed into the common room from the ladder below, and after confirming with the prefects that the students had all arrived, he began his speech. "All students must return to their house common rooms before 6 p.m. No student may leave the dormitory building after this time. Each class will be escorted by a teacher, No students may use the restrooms without the accompaniment of a teacher. All Quidditch training and matches are postponed. No more activities will be carried out in the evening. The Ravenclaw students all stood or sat quietly in the common room, listening to Professor Flitwick reading aloud in his shrill voice the contents of a parchment with the Hogwarts school seal on it. A serious attack has occurred. The attacker broke through the magical defenses set up by Professor Sprout and destroyed all the mandrakes in the greenhouse. Rolling up the parchment in his hand, Professor Flitwick looked at everyone and said, while waving his wand to display a phantom image in the phantom image, the third greenhouse, where Hugo and the others had previously attended classes, was completely dark, with even obvious signs of collapse. Obviously, this attack was much more violent than everyone had imagined. According to Veneto, it's like solving a problem that could be solved with a single bullet with a 381 heavy artillery. And there is no other reasonable explanation for this behavior other than provoking and demonstrating the attacker's power, fiendfire. Several older students quickly recognized the type of magic used by the attacker through the traces of the attack site in the image. That's right, it's the traces of fiendfire, and the attacker's mastery of this magic is not low, even able to delay the ignition for dozens of seconds. This is why we couldn't find the attacker after we arrived, Professor Flitwick's shrill voice echoed in the common room. The Ravenclaw students around him did not chatter and express their opinions as usual, but listened quietly to the head of house's explanation. While everyone's face showed a serious expression, now the situation is very obvious. The attacker should be the mastermind behind the so-called Chamber of Secrets monster attack incident, and the only purpose of choosing to burn those mandrakes now is to avoid exposing the attacker's identity after saving Colin. However, it was also in this attack that the other party revealed a skilled mastery of the dark magic fiendfire. And this naturally attracted the attention of the school at the same time. Because of this attack using fiendfire, the severity of the previous attacks was immediately raised a level. At least now no one regards this thing as just a prank, but correspondingly, Hogwarts also faces the risk of being closed. Because if the culprit is not caught, all the teachers and students of the school are likely to be under some kind of life threat. Just as Headmaster Flitwick was warning the students of the school, Hugo began to contact Enterprise and try to obtain first-hand information from the scene. Enterprise had already arrived at the destroyed Greenhouse 3 with Headmaster Dumbledore. Besides them, Lockhart was babbling incessantly on the ruins of the scene. That's right, it should be a dragon that destroyed this place. Looking at Enterprise squatting on the ground inspecting and Headmaster Dumbledore standing aside, Lockhart had a smiling face. I think it was the dung fertilizer used by Professor Sprout that attracted the dragon, because dragons often use feces to divide their territories, and the dung fertilizer here obviously has a very strong provocative effect on the dragon, so naturally the dragon's breath came in. Alright, Gilderoy, thank you for your analysis. But I think you'd better go to the office now and think about how to appease the frightened students. Even Dumbledore with his good temper couldn't stand Lockhart's nonsense, so he thought of a way to send Lockhart away. After Lockhart left, Dumbledore asked Enterprise, who had finished the inspection, and stood up, Miss Halsey, what have you found here? Only a little bit of discovery, because fiendfire destroyed too many traces. Enterprise shook her head looking at Dumbledore. Although the other party consciously erased most of the traces, judging from the position and direction of the half-footprint remaining on the ground, the attacker should be from inside the school. For Voldemort, who was able to kill his father and grandparents and frame his uncle when he was studying at Hogwarts, he would definitely not forget to erase his traces when launching an attack. Even so, that noseless guy certainly wouldn't have thought that there would be a ship girl, a creature with perception far exceeding that of humans, who could find that half of a footprint that he had overlooked and left on the grass, inside the school. Dumbledore suddenly became serious. What else have you found? The rest are just some guesses I made based on the situation at the scene, Enterprise said seriously. Therefore, the following content is for reference only, and cannot be used as a definite conclusion. Chapter 206. After the attack. I can understand that, Miss Halsey. After all, there are so few clues left for us now, so we can only speculate about this matter. Headmaster Dumbledore had a gentle smile on his face. So please tell me your guess. Whether this guess is right or wrong, I think it can bring us closer to the truth. Based on my observations just now, the footprints left are imprints of the front 1/3 of the soles of sneakers, so it is impossible to judge whether these are men's or women's shoes. After Professor Dumbledore said this, Enterprise began to talk about her previous guesses. However, from the pattern on the soles, it can be judged that this attacker should be from the wizarding world, or from a family with very good economic conditions in the Muggle world. As she spoke, Enterprise waved her wand to display the pattern on the sole, and then pointed to the patterns to explain to Professor Dumbledore, "This pattern is hand-carved. It has almost disappeared in the Muggle world outside. Only a very few expensive custom brands would choose this method. On the contrary, it is more common in the wizarding world. I think these shoes are likely to be from a pure-blood wizard." Enterprise was interrupted by Headmaster Dumbledore before she could finish speaking. "I have observed this at the school. In fact, most of the teachers and students now wear shoes bought in the Muggle world, because these daily necessities in the wizarding world are obviously much more expensive. Only a portion of pure-blood wizards who are relatively wealthy would consciously wear magical world attire from head to toe, anytime and anywhere. Some of this is because of tradition, but more of it is a manifestation of a certain stance. So, the attacker is a pure-blood wizard? That does fit a legendary heir of Slytherin," Enterprise said softly. "No, of course not. We cannot assume a person's position based on their bloodline." Hearing Enterprise say this, Dumbledore immediately corrected her. "Under any circumstances, we should face everyone with a neutral attitude, so you and the headmaster checked for a long time, and besides confirming that the attacker is indeed someone from the school, the rest of the time was spent discussing issues related to values." When Hugo was lying in bed that night and contacting Enterprise, Enterprise told Hugo about the content of her discussion with the headmaster, which surprised Hugo a bit. "Obviously, our headmaster also believes that the attacker is from inside the school, and I, a newly arrived faculty member from a foreign country, am naturally a prime suspect. Therefore, our headmaster obviously hopes to understand my thoughts through such exchanges, and then use his own experience to judge whether I am the attacker hiding behind the scenes." "Did our headmaster just inquire?" Hugo asked, somewhat puzzled. "Although Dumbledore seems more kind after he got older, I think there are some methods he might not use on underage students, but there should be no taboos against adults like you. But that would only be in emergency situations, and the situation is not that bad yet." Enterprise thought Dumbledore's current approach was normal, not to mention that my current identity is a former Auror, and Auror training includes training to resist legilimency and veritaserum. Even if the headmaster really suspects me, he won't take any action at this time to alert the enemy. By the way, I can now confirm one thing." After finishing talking about the things related to herself, Enterprise stated her observation conclusion, that is, today's attacker should not be a Slytherin student, because I can confirm that they were not at the scene when the attack occurred. There is also even worse news. Do you want to hear it? At this moment, Veneto entered the Admiral network. "Speak." "There have been enough unexpected bad news today." Hugo took a deep breath and said gently to Veneto, "Although the students on the Quidditch pitch today were not all present, if you combine the list of students on the field with the list of people attending the Halloween banquet and remove the duplicates, you will find that it is a complete list of Hogwarts students," Veneto said in a very fast tone. "In other words, there is no students who cannot prove that they were not present during both attacks." "What about the school's faculty and staff?" Hugo asked. "Are there any faculty and staff who did not participate in these two events, and whose whereabouts during this period cannot be confirmed?" "There is only one, and that is Hagrid." Veneto's helpless tone came from the Admiral network. "Because he lives alone in a place far away from the castle, there is simply not enough evidence to prove where he went during this period. This is just terrible." Subconsciously glancing at the location of Hagrid's hut, Hugo sighed. "It seems that Hagrid will inevitably have to spend some time in Azkaban again this time." "That's right, using fiend fire to attack is no small matter," Enterprise sighed softly. "Maybe old Malfoy will drive Dumbledore out of the school like in the original text." The next morning, the news that Hagrid had been arrested and Professor Dumbledore had been forced to leave Hogwarts spread throughout the castle overnight. This made the students in the castle feel insecure. "This is troublesome. Dumbledore is gone. They will probably close the school in a short time. After he leaves, there will be attacks happening every day. The attacker may come back and completely kill those non-pure blood wizards in the school. Hogwarts is indeed the safest place in the British wizarding world, but a very important reason is that Professor Dumbledore is here. If he leaves here, then Hogwarts is just a magical castle." In an instant, a large number of pessimistic remarks filled the entire castle, and fear spread rapidly in an unprecedented form. Therefore, the sun warming the outer walls of the castle seemed unable to shine through the mullioned windows. Every face in the school looked terrified, and every burst of laughter in the corridor seemed harsh and strange, and was quickly suppressed. However, this pessimistic atmosphere did not affect Hugo much. Realizing that the previous plan was ineffective, He began to mobilize the ship girls located around the school to search the Forbidden Forest and the Black Lake. After all, the basilisk has not been hibernating all the time, and the house elves in the school have not been feeding this monster. Considering the environment around Hogwarts and the fact that the basilisk has not been discovered for so long, Hugo and the ship girls almost all judged that there was another exit of the Chamber of Secrets in the Forbidden Forest or the Black Lake. It's just that neither the Forbidden Forest nor the Black Lake are small in area. And now, because these activities are not suitable for being carried out ostentatiously, the search progress of the ship girls is very slow, even if they roughly judged that the exit was probably not in the Forbidden Forest through the fact that creatures like Acromantulas, who are extremely afraid of basilisks, dare to live in the Forbidden Forest. The Black Lake alone is enough to keep the ship girls busy. Therefore, during this period, Hugo could only suppress the impatience in his heart and wait silently, waiting for the ship girls to bring him effective news. Chapter 207 Discover. Summer quietly arrived on the ground surrounding the castle. The sky and the lake mirrored each other, both turning a light, purplish blue. In the newly repaired greenhouse, blossoms as large as cabbages unfolded due to the destruction of the mandrakes and the attack by the fiend fire. The school board finally stopped bickering and agreed to allocate funds to purchase mandrakes or petrification reversal potions. Unfortunately, the school placed its order far too late. Consequently, there were no mandrakes or prepared potions available on the market. To obtain these items, they would have to wait until the mandrakes matured in late summer. While Hugo peacefully directed the ship girls in searching the suspicious areas and methodically studying ancient runes, the interior of the castle had descended into chaos. Every faculty member strictly enforced the previously established rules for the students' behavior. For example, all students were forbidden from acting independently. Even going to the restroom required a group of at least 3 for the majority of students. Being together and escorted from place to place by professors was a welcome experience, but for Hugo, it clearly hampered his movements at this time. Only a small number of pure-blood family supporters of blood purity seemed very excited, and among these people, Malfoy's performance was the most prominent. He strutted around the school as if he had just been appointed head boy. However, he had reason to be so arrogant at this time. After all, as a pure-blood, Malfoy faced basically no risk in the attacks. His father was a school governor who could decide the final selection of the headmaster. More importantly, the headmaster he hated, Dumbledore, had been driven out of the school by his father. Why do you think the school governors were willing to let Professor Dumbledore leave? Hermione asked Hugo and the others, wearing an expression as if she had swallowed a fly while watching Malfoy swagger past. Clearly, the school is already in a dangerous situation. Why would the governor choose a plan that is obviously detrimental to the school and their own interests? Most of the people who can be school governors at Hogwarts are old pure-blood families, so they don't really approve of Headmaster Dumbledore's teaching philosophy, and they've wanted to drive him out of the school for more than a day or two, Venetia said softly, staring at Malfoy's retreating figure. Now they can use this attack as an excuse to drive the headmaster out of the school, and although a small number of them support Headmaster Dumbledore in their hearts, with the connections that the Malfoy family made when they were Death Eaters, they naturally have ways to force them to support their opinions. This is just terrible, Hugo said, shaking his head subconsciously. Even if it's a power struggle, this is not a good idea at this time. At least I think life should be more important. However, before he could finish his sentence, a smile suddenly appeared on his face because Retribution and Unicorn, who had been searching in the Black Lake, had successfully found their target. Are you okay? Hermione asked anxiously, seeing the sudden smile on Hugo's face. I know the basilisk is scary. Some people in Hufflepuff have even been hospitalized from fright, but you shouldn't be, of course. Of course not, my dear sister, Hugo quickly reassured his sister, realizing that the smile he had just shown was indeed a little frightening. Your brother is not that fragile. I just thought of something interesting. After saying that, Hugo told a joke from later years to make Hermione laugh, finally avoiding her series of concerned questions. And when everyone arrived in the Defense Against the Dark Arts classroom, their mood suddenly became even worse. Because at this time, when everyone was more serious than usual, Lockhart's relaxed and cheerful demeanor was particularly jarring. Watching Lockhart continue to brag incessantly, Hugo sighed helplessly and then began to monitor the ship girls' exploration of the pipes below the Black Lake through the Admiral network. The exit of this pipe was located underwater, more than 300 meters away from Hogwarts Castle, surrounded by rocks and aquatic plants for cover. If you didn't look carefully, it could easily be mistaken for an underwater reef. In addition, the castle also had a purification system to prevent sewage from being discharged into the Black Lake. This also prevented the ship girls from finding the drain outlet by tracking the sewage. This wasn't to say that these wizards had a strong environmental awareness, but rather that wizards often poured items with magical properties, such as various potion remnants or failed potions, into the sewer. When this drainage system was first built more than 100 years ago, there was no purification system, which resulted in a serious ecological disaster in the lake. So, since then, a purification system had been installed here and has been operating to this day through the Admiral network. Hugo saw Audacious, who had come from London, quickly deploy a magic array underwater to control the warning magic array at the sewer outlet. Then, Retribution and Unicorn immediately destroyed the fence at the sewer outlet and crawled inside. What followed was a winding underwater sewer pipe, more than a kilometer long. Many parts of this pipe were within the magical alert circle of Hogwarts Castle, and any magical presence other than the basilisk would activate the castle's alert system. I think if wizards were to come here, perhaps only someone wearing the invisibility cloak, one of the Deathly Hallows, would be able to reach here without alarming anyone, Audacious said to Firefly and Retribution, looking at the surrounding situation after landing on a platform surrounded by pipes. Obviously, the pure-blood wizards who designed this section of the pipe back then did not consider the possibility of crossing this kilometer without using magic at all. So the ship girls were able to reach here smoothly after quickly changing into dry clothes using the ship equipment space. The three ship girls began to walk forward along a wide tunnel with snake-shaped reliefs all over the opening. It could be seen that this tunnel had been carefully repaired before. The surroundings of the tunnel were full of reliefs that highlighted the greatness of pure-blood wizards and belittled all creatures other than non-pure-blood wizards. It's just that because it had never been maintained for a long time, and because the basilisk often passed through here, many parts of these sculptures had become blurred due to wear and tear following the ground, which was much smoother than other places because the basilisk often passed through it. Indomitable and the others jogged upwards, while three pairs of eyes vigilantly stared at their surroundings from time to time. A ship girl would stop and take a piece of basilisk scale the size of a palm from the cracks in the bricks of the corridor and put it into her ship equipment space. Along the way, some slime-like soft-bodied animals crawled out of the cracks around the tunnel and tried to attack Indomitable and the others. At first, the ship girls were a little flustered when facing these monsters that were difficult to kill with physical attacks, especially since they would also spray a highly acidic mucus that could stick to the enemy and corrode them. But after discovering that each slime had a core inside that could be fatally struck with one blow, the ship girls with powerful vision easily shattered those cores, which were not much different from the surroundings, with their pistols and eliminated them. Chapter 208 Stone Gate. In the entire dark and oppressive tunnel, only the eyes of the ship girls flickered with a faint light. As they possessed dark vision, they generally didn't use any light sources after entering the darkness because their combat experience told them that lighting a light in the darkness was actually equivalent to reporting their position to those hidden enemies. After advancing for more than 10 minutes in the dark passage, Indomitable and the others found themselves in a huge cavern. This cavern looked as huge as the Great Hall of Hogwarts. The sides and surroundings of the cavern were all protruding rocks, and there were also a large number of snake sheds, either broken or complete, left among these rocks. "Let's collect these things first," Indomitable said. Then together with Repulse, she collected the large pieces of snake shed. Unicorn then released her carrier-based aircraft, turning them into small birds, and collected the scales scattered all over the ground. After they had collected all the things left by the basilisk in the cavern over thousands of years, Hugo also finished his lesson and returned to the common room. After reconnecting to the Admiral network, Hugo saw Indomitable and the others standing in front of a stone door at one end of the cavern. Above it was written in runes, "Only the pure blood may enter." Looking at these ancient words carved on the door, and the large and small snake-shaped reliefs carved around the door, Indomitable and the others immediately confirmed that they had indeed found the right place, because what they were looking for was the Chamber of Secrets of Slytherin, and among the four founders of Hogwarts, only Slytherin paid so much attention to blood purity. After all, according to everyone's observations just now, unlike the pipes built in the Victorian era, this large cave and the stone door should be supporting projects built by Slytherin for the Chamber of Secrets 1,000 years ago. It seems that if we want to pass through the door, we must prove to this door that we are pure blood, Indomitable said, after stepping forward and waving her wand to inspect it. She immediately understood how to use this door. "The problem is that there is only engine oil in my blood vessels." Before she could finish speaking, Indomitable suddenly raised her wand and looked towards a dark part of the hall, because she heard some rustling sounds ringing nearby. "Something is approaching." Repulse and Unicorn also each took out their wands and firearms. and leaned back against the stone door in a vigilant posture. Although the surrounding sounds were very small, for the ship girls, they could not only capture these sounds, but even judge some basic information about the other party through the sounds. A group of quadrupeds, numbering between 30 and 40, weighing between 60 kilograms and 75 kilograms, as those things approached. The three ship girls quickly put their information into the Admiral network to communicate with each other and summarize it. When the black shadows rushing to the front rush took place more than 10 meters away from the ship girls, who already had a preliminary understanding of these guys, immediately lowered their muzzles and pulled the triggers of the guns in their hands. Squeak, after being hit by a large caliber Webley revolver bullet. Several black shadows fell to the ground as if they had been hit by a heavy hammer, but the death of their companions did not affect the attacking speed of these monsters, which were like small wild boars, and they still rushed towards Indomitable and the others frantically. In an instant, the sound of gunfire echoed in this huge cave, and at the same time, Indomitable also began to use magic to try to attack the rushing monsters. It was also at this time that the ship girls used the fire from the muzzle to see clearly the specific appearance of the monsters on the opposite side. These were animals that looked like rats with hard thorns as thick as chopsticks growing all over their bodies. Perhaps because these animals had lived underground without light for a long time, they were all blind. Perhaps it was also because of this that these strange rats could continue to survive and reproduce in this passage used by the basilisk, who could kill anyone with a single glare. These rats have magical resistance. Indomitable discovered that several stunners cast on the rats could only stun them for a few seconds at most, so she immediately put away her wand and took out a brain machine gun and strafed. Although it was not difficult for them to kill these monsters with their current level of magic, compared to those more powerful magic firearms obviously made much less noise. I feel that these creatures are more like artificially cultivated creatures specially used to guard this place. 2 minutes later, Repulse picked up a strange stiff-haired rat from the pile of corpses and performed a simple dissection with a knife. These guys have a layer of fine scales growing close to their skin, which has a certain defensive ability against both physical and magical attacks. In addition, the teeth and claws of this thing secrete a mucus full of various harmful microorganisms, which can cause serious damage to the attacked. You said they have physical defense capabilities. Indomitable looked at the large rat that was being dissected by Repulse's hands, and then said, a little puzzled. But we clearly killed them with one shot just now. This kind of physical defense is only equivalent to the level of 1 or 2 millimeters thick steel plate. It's okay to block cold weapons, but it's quite difficult to block muzzle-loading guns. As for our modern weapons, the other party can't block them at all, Repulse said after using the knife in her hand to draw on those large rats. It's understandable that this situation occurs. After all, this passage should have been built in the Victorian era, and the guns of that era were much worse than our weapons. That's right. Unicorn looked at these piles of monster corpses, and soon remembered something. Moreover, the guys responsible for this construction came from the Gaunt family. With the characteristics of that family, it is estimated that they would never have thought that people who don't know magic would come here. So naturally, there would be no defense against the stupid and fragile muggles in their eyes. Okay, now we can finally concentrate our attention on opening the door. After using flames to burn the corpses to ashes, the ship girls began to study the stone door. After discussion, everyone agreed that opening this place should not require parcel twang, otherwise the stone door would have written, "Only the parselmouth may pass." Could it be smearing blood on it? Like the obstacles set by that noseless guy for his Horcruxes, Hugo suggested through the Admiral network? Impossible, absolutely impossible, Indomitable replied while checking the stone door in the surrounding situation. Unlike that noseless guy, Slytherin is a great wizard and would never use such obvious low-level tactics. Come to think of it, being able to become one of the 3 giants who established Hogwarts, instead of a notorious dark wizard like Herpo the Fatal, and even being able to become friends with people like Gryffindor, Slytherin would definitely not degenerate to the extent of Voldemort. Actually, if we smash it hard, we should be able to open a hole in the stone wall next to it, which is probably 2 or 3 meters thick, Repulse said after carefully checking the surrounding situation. But in this case, we might as well just smash the pool in the girls' bathroom and rush in. After all, we've gone to such great lengths to secretly install some monitoring equipment in the Chamber of Secrets, and then catch the diary, instead of just killing the basilisk. After listening to Repulse's inspection report, the Admiral network suddenly fell silent. Everyone was trying hard to think about how to pass through this stone door without alarming anyone. Chapter 209. The night before. Deep beneath Hogwarts, in a cave of unknown depth, Three shipgirls stood silently, while dozens more in different locations pondered the same question. Fortunately, with the connection of the Admiral network, each shipgirl could precisely sense the specific conditions of the cave and the stone door at its end. What kind of person is Slytherin? Suddenly, Hugo inquired through the Admiral network to all the shipgirls. I want everyone to describe him in a single word. After hearing Hugo's question, the shipgirls, who were deep in thought, quickly gave their respective answers. After statistical analysis, noble was the most frequently used adjective. So, among the four founders of Hogwarts, Slytherin's first impression on everyone is nobility. Hugo, pretending to read in the Ravenclaw common room, slightly curled his lips and then said to the shipgirls in front of the stone door, if that's the case, think about what you would do when visiting someone's home according to wizarding traditions. Then, perform those most ancient etiquette rituals in front of the stone door. Alright, let's give it a try. Although Hugo's plan sounded a bit unreliable, it didn't require too much effort after all. So, Indomitable and the others quickly straightened their clothes in front of the door and began performing various actions according to ancient etiquette. As if visiting a wizard's home, the wizarding world changes much less than the Muggle world in many aspects, especially these etiquette rituals, which have remained unchanged for thousands of years. Therefore, the three shipgirls quickly performed a complete set of rituals according to the most ancient understanding. Just as they finished a complete set of rituals in front of the stone door, a grating sound came from the stone door in front of them. Something really changed. Indomitable's cheers immediately came from the Admiral network. Through the Admiral network, Hugo saw the serpentine stone carvings around the cave come to life and form a stone platform in front of the door. As the stone platform took shape, a circular stone slab appeared at the top of the platform, with a recessed right hand printed on it. Obviously, this should be Slytherin's method of verifying bloodlines. Fortunately, before this operation, the shipgirls had considered Slytherin's obvious preference for pure-blood wizards and made corresponding preparations soon. Indomitable took out a small bottle containing about 5 milliliters of blood from her body and inserted a finger into it to absorb the blood into her body. This blood was drawn by Veneto from her roommate Luna while everyone was asleep at night. Although the Lovigant family is not particularly famous, it is a pure-blood family that has been passed down from the era of the four founders to this day. As expected, after pressing her right hand on the stone platform, Indomitable felt something pricking the side of her ring finger, so she quickly transferred the blood to her ring finger and made contact with a needle. The needle disappeared after drawing about 1 milliliter of blood, and then a roaring sound came from behind the heavy stone door. It's done. After confirming that the magical ritual to verify the bloodline was over, Indomitable withdrew her hand and took a step back. Just as her hand left the stone platform, the stone platform came to life again and transformed back into a large group of carved snakes, swimming towards the wall in front of everyone. However, unlike before, these stone carvings did not return to the door to become the original decorations, but came to place on the side of the stone door and formed a door frame. When the door frame was completely formed, the part in the middle, which was not much different from the surrounding stone walls, disappeared, revealing a doorway. Inside seemed to be endless darkness. This should be it. Indomitable, with a magic wand in one hand and the ship's gun in the other, walked through the doorway. Then Repulse and Unicorn followed her in, both closing their eyes. Although they had confirmed when Xiangjiang was attacked before that shipgirls with collective consciousness would not be killed by the basilisk's gaze, but considering that such a stare would cause damage to the soul, and the fact that shipgirls themselves can act without vision, they still did their best to take precautions. What appeared in front of the three shipgirls and everyone on the Admiral network was a slightly eerie scene. They stood on a platform on the stone wall of another huge cave hall, and a moist, fishy smell assaulted their nostrils. On the edge of the platform, which was about 3 stories high, a slope ran straight up from the bottom of the cave. At the same time, a giant snake, which looked 15 or 16 meters long, was coiled up in a pile, dozing at the bottom of the cave. That was the basilisk that had launched multiple attacks in the school before. Its entire body was green, with a bright luster unique to venomous snakes, and its body was as thick as the trunk of an oak tree. Perhaps the opening of the door caused some movement, so the basilisk slightly raised its flat head and flicked its tongue up and down to sense the surrounding odors. Dozens of seconds later, it lowered its head again and fell into deep sleep after discovering that there were no fleshy creatures around. Let's start. After the basilisk fell asleep again, the three shipgirls present immediately took out some reconnaissance equipment from the ship's equipment and carrier-based aircraft and stuffed them into various corners of the cave. Then tiptoed out of the cave. Is today's operation considered over? Looking at Indomitable and the others who were withdrawing from the cave and cleaning up the traces, Hugo asked subconsciously. After all, the ship girls' battles along the way looked quite fierce, but he didn't expect that the movement was the smallest when they finally met the basilisk. Feeling as if the climax of the movie was directly interrupted, of course it's over, and the plan was perfectly completed. Through the Admiral network, Indomitable probably knew why Hugo asked such a question. The core mission this time is to put surveillance equipment into the Chamber of Secrets while that ivory Horcrux is unconscious. So that next time it manipulates the basilisk to attack again, we can get an early warning and then catch the opponent. In fact, the ship girls' earliest plan was to install these monitoring devices in their girls' bathroom, but later they found that in that situation, there would only be a reaction after the basilisk came out, and the warning time was too short. That's why the ship girls made such a big fuss and carried out such a dangerous operation. According to their estimates, with the distance between the Chamber of Secrets and the bathroom, these devices could give everyone a 7 to 8 minute warning time for the ship girls currently in Hogwarts Castle. Such a long time is enough for them to prepare and rush to the exit of the Chamber of Secrets to block the opponent. However, Hugo's happy mood did not last too long, because in the afternoon's Transfiguration class, Professor McGonagall told them that the exams would be held on June 1st, only about 2 weeks away from today. What made Professor McGonagall feel somewhat gratified was that, compared to the wailing among the Gryffindor students when she announced this matter in the morning, both Ravenclaw and Hufflepuff seemed very calm. In the current state of emergency, the purpose of not closing the school is to allow you to receive education. After nodding in satisfaction, Professor McGonagall added, therefore, the exams will still be conducted as usual, and I believe you will all study hard. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 210 Touch? In the following period, Hugo seemed extremely busy. Besides preparing for exams, his study of ancient runic magic also entered a new stage. In addition to trying to integrate these magics into ordinary spellcasting, he also used various raw materials obtained from Enterprise to create magical tools related to runic magic: smoke, flash, dust, tear gas. Very good, my dear Admiral. During one-on-one tutoring, Enterprise expressed her appreciation for the batch of disposable rune stones Hugo had created. Although the production techniques show that your level is still not skilled enough, the overall handling and thinking methods are very good. The ship girls all have a serious side belonging to soldiers, so in such formal matters, they say what they mean and will not blindly praise Hugo just because he is the Admiral, because in the eyes of the ship girls, being honest in these matters is a manifestation of loyalty to the Admiral. For example, the reason why Enterprise praised Hugo was because among the rune stones that had just been created, Flash and Dust were original products. After he summarized the knowledge he had learned before, among them, Flash was developed from a traditional flame spell, by allowing the original rune stone that could burn for about 30 minutes to release light and heat instantly to achieve the effect of a flashbang. The production of Dust rune stones relies on new thinking, which is formed by combining the original Dust rune stone for tracking intermediaries and the Breeze rune stone together. More importantly, Hugo's current level is not enough to create some powerful rune stones. Therefore, compared to those combat rune stones that look gorgeous, these auxiliary rune stones are more practical for Hugo now. After all, for Hugo now, the effect of those attack rune stones is similar to a spellcasting effect. Therefore, compared to the simple superposition of attack power, he prefers to create some equipment that can make up for his lack of spellcasting level. Since the last time an owl died, the other party has not launched an attack for several months. After finishing today's course, Hugo asked through the Admiral network during a chat, I'm worried that the diary may have realized something was wrong, so it simply went into hiding. There's no need to worry about this. I guarantee that the other party will definitely attack, Enterprise said decisively. Because according to the news I got, the new season of Mandrix has matured. If the other party doesn't want to completely expose themselves, they will definitely launch an attack. Recently, this attack may be Voldemort killing someone to obtain their life force and completely resurrecting himself through the Horcrux, or it may be creating chaos and taking the opportunity to kill Colin Creevey, the only witness in the hospital. Indeed, these are all possible, Hugo nodded after listening to the two possibilities given by Enterprise. At this moment, a grandfather clock in the corner of Enterprise's office rang. It's 11:30 noon, let's go eat quickly. I remember you have classes in the afternoon, Enterprise said, standing up from her seat, but just as the two were walking to the door of the room, ready to pull the door open, Enterprise, who was walking in front, suddenly stopped, with a nervous look on her face. "What's wrong?" Hugo, who was standing behind, asked curiously when he saw Enterprise blocking the door. "The basilisk is out." Enterprise turned her head and said to Hugo. "Next, I'll go with you." Hugo ran to the table, put all the previous rune stones into his pocket, and then said to Enterprise, "Anyway, with your level, you can definitely block the basilisk, and I only need to hold back the controlled person, so there won't be too much danger. There's nothing that can be guaranteed on the battlefield. More importantly, if I fight a basilisk later, the noise will definitely be loud, and you will only be in the way in that place." Once in a combat state, Enterprise is under absolute rational emotional control, so she sounds more blunt when speaking, compared to the exit of the Chamber of Secrets. "I think the school hospital is more important, because the other party may really take this opportunity to silence Colin Creevey, so Admiral, I think you, okay, I'll guard the entrance of the school hospital." Hearing Enterprise's explanation, Hugo, knowing that this was not the time to bargain, immediately changed his mind and agreed with her point of view. "Very good. Venado has already set off from the common room and will meet you at the entrance of the school hospital." Speaking of this, Enterprise raised her right arm and gave a military salute. "May the sea bless us, may the sea bless us." Hugo also gave a military salute and then trotted towards the school hospital on the second floor. "I hope we can really catch the other party this time." After watching her admiral disappear on the stairs, Enterprise muttered softly, then grabbed her wand and ran towards Myrtle's bathroom, also located on the second floor, along another staircase. When Enterprise came to the almost empty corridor, a second-year Hufflepuff girl who didn't seem very familiar before stood at the intersection, opening her mouth to say hello. Bang! However, before the other party could finish speaking, Enterprise suddenly raised her hand and cast a stunning spell on her, causing the girl to fall directly to the ground. Damn it, Imperious Curse! The moment she came to the corridor, by observing the other party's eyes, Enterprise realized that the girl was controlled by the Imperious Curse and should be on guard here. Following the standard tactics of the American Magical Congress Aurors, she took the lead in knocking the other party unconscious. As expected, she found something similar to a mirror in the little girl's hand. Fortunately, it hasn't been activated. After communicating with Indomitable through the Admiral network and checking the small mirror, Enterprise breathed a sigh of relief after confirming that the miniature magical tool had not been activated because she had acted quickly. Then she tied up the second-year girl and stuffed her into a nearby broom closet, and then added a series of defensive spells to ensure safety. "I should have thought of it. If the diary can control one person, it shouldn't be too difficult to control everyone in a dormitory." After settling the girl, Enterprise showed a thoughtful expression on her face. This is why the two previous counts found that no students were absent during each attack, because this piece of Voldemort's soul can take turns possessing the bodies of several students and then complete the attack separately. Thinking of this, Enterprise's eyes widened suddenly, because she realized that in this case, Voldemort's main body might not be with the basilisk. However, she had just had time to send an alarm to the Admiral network when she heard the sound of heavy objects moving from the bathroom not far away, followed by Myrtle's sharp cry, Who is there?" However, before she could finish a sentence, the sound stopped abruptly, coming so fast. Realizing that the basilisk had rushed out of the Chamber of Secrets at this time and petrified Myrtle, Enterprise immediately added several spells to herself and then ran towards the door of the bathroom. Chapter 211 Battle of the Basilisk. As Enterprise approached the restroom, she suddenly slowed her pace, hearing an abrupt silence within. Considering snakes favor surprise attacks when hunting, the basilisk was likely lurking inside, ready to ambush any students or teachers drawn by the noise. Realizing this, Enterprise gently waved her wand, transforming a nearby suit of armor into a dummy, and directed it towards the restroom entrance. Initially, everything seemed normal, but as the dummy reached the doorway, chaos erupted. A massive serpent, at least several dozen feet long, burst from within. Judging by its size and the crimson crest atop its head, Enterprise immediately recognized the creature for what it was. The basilisk opened its cavernous jaws and swallowed the dummy's upper body in one gulp, then strained to straighten its neck. Attempting to swallow the rest, the basilisk's venom quickly dissolved the simple transfiguration on the dummy, reverting it to its original form as a suit of armor, which clattered to the floor. Warning: a basilisk has appeared in Moaning Myrtle's bathroom on the second floor, Enterprise announced, seizing the opportunity while the basilisk spat out the armor fragments. She then raised her wand and advanced with a gentle wave of her wand. A cornflower blue flame ignited in the air. From this fissure of azure fire, eagles materialized, each composed entirely of the same fiery substance. Instantly, these eagles shot forth like arrows towards the colossal basilisk. Realizing it had misidentified its target, the basilisk, having just shaken off the armor from its mouth, turned to attack Enterprise, only to be met head-on by the fiery eagles. Unlike ordinary magical creatures, the basilisk is a biological weapon cultivated through dark magic, possessing not only a long lifespan, immense size, and a deadly gaze, but also a magical resistance comparable to that of a dragon. Therefore, upon seeing the approaching firebirds, the basilisk simply closed its eyes and continued its charge without flinching. The basilisk had clearly underestimated the potency of Enterprise's magic. These eagles of flame were no ordinary fire, but a novel spell developed after Odin's visit, incorporating the ancient runic knowledge he brought. Unlike conventional magic, this spell harnessed the power of intense emotion. As a Valkyrie of the Pacific, Enterprise imbued the flames with a spirit of slaughter and destruction, making the power far exceed that of normal magical fire. When the basilisk emerged from the flames, its entire head was a charred, pockmarked mess, and its once bulbous yellow eyes were completely incinerated. Black blood gushed onto the floor as the basilisk emitted pained, gurgling sounds. Despite its grievous injuries, the basilisk's formidable vitality allowed it to maintain its fighting ability. In fact, it seemed even more aggressive due to the pain. Witnessing the basilisk's ferocious transformation after being wounded, Enterprise, with agility far surpassing that of a human, sidestepped its attack and used her heel to push off the wall behind her, leaping onto the basilisk's head. Realizing an enemy had jumped onto its head, the basilisk immediately halted its advance and reared its upper body, attempting to crush Enterprise between itself and the ceiling. However, the basilisk's movements were far too clumsy compared to a shipgirl, and the collision only resulted in it hitting the ceiling and becoming dazed. Enterprise, however, flipped off the basilisk's head in the nick of time before the impact, then conjured several azure flame spears and plunged them into the wounds on its face. As Enterprise gracefully leapt from the basilisk to the ground, the fiery spears sank deep into the creature's flesh. Although they didn't penetrate the brain due to the layers of bone and muscle, the pain was enough to drive the basilisk mad. Driven by madness, the basilisk thrashed wildly, attacking everything around it. Torches on the walls, chandeliers on the ceiling, and decorations lining the corridor all crashed down like rain. Using the cacophony of falling objects as cover, Enterprise transformed various items on the floor into metal spikes of varying sizes, then sent them flying towards the basilisk, wreathed in blue fire. Soon, numerous wounds, both shallow and deep, appeared on the basilisk's body. Some were merely scratches on its scales, while others were gaping holes the size of a forearm. The pain, instead of further enraging the basilisk, seemed to calm it. After probing its surroundings with its tongue, the monster's head lunged down. The basilisk's mouth was agape, wide enough to swallow an adult whole, revealing rows of dagger-like fangs, thin, glinting, and dripping with venom. Watching the ever-enlarging maw in her vision, Enterprise held her wand steady, fixing her gaze on the creature. When the distance was close enough, she unleashed a torrent of incandescent fire into its open mouth. The distance between them was too short, and the basilisk was in the midst of a full-speed charge, leaving it no time to close its mouth or turn away. It could only watch helplessly as it collided with a fiery blast. This flame, imbued with the intent to destroy all, effortlessly pierced the basilisk's thin upper jaw, then completely incinerated its brain. Boom! The lifeless basilisk crashed uncontrollably into the wall, creating a large crater in the stone masonry. Finally got it. And no innocents were harmed. Perfect. Enterprise, who had rolled away to avoid the impact at the last moment, stood up. She retrieved a spear from beside the scattered knight's armor and plunged it into the basilisk's empty eye socket. After confirming the basilisk was indeed dead, Enterprise pulled a pair of dragon-hide gloves from her pocket and put them on. She then plucked over a dozen teeth from the basilisk's mouth and entered the restroom. Upon entering, the first thing that caught her eye was moaning Myrtle, floating above one of the stalls. Unlike her usual milky white, translucent form, Myrtle was now pitch black, shrouded in smoke, and lying motionless in midair. How tragic! Enterprise shook her head. To be killed twice by a basilisk's gaze had to be some kind of Guinness World Record. In the corner of the restroom, a second-year Hufflepuff girl lay supine in a puddle of water. Fortunately, after a quick examination, Enterprise found that the girl had only fainted. After examining her, Enterprise discovered a trace of Voldemort's aura on the student, which explained their ability to command the basilisk. However, strangely enough, Enterprise couldn't find the diary on her. Enterprise, We found the diary, Hugo and Venato's voices echoed in the Admiral's network. You won't believe where it was hidden. Chapter 212 Diary appears. Rewinding time to 5 minutes prior, just after Hugo, panting, met up with Venato at the entrance of the school infirmary, Enterprise's amplified voice echoed through the corridor. Enterprise has engaged the enemy. If we're discovered here by a professor, we'll definitely be dragged back to the common room. Looking at the empty corridor, Venato suddenly became anxious. We have to find a place to hide. This way, Hugo pulled Venato towards a closet diagonally opposite the infirmary entrance. After opening the wooden door, the two of them hid inside and closed the door. In the corner of the closet were a mop, a few rags, and a galvanized iron bucket. It seemed to be where Filch usually kept his cleaning tools. Fortunately, these items were only piled in the corner, leaving most of the closet space empty and large enough for Hugo and Venato to stay inside. Let me tell you, among all the Battleship Sisters, only I can squeeze in here with you. Venato, who was almost pressed against Hugo after they barely squeezed into the closet, said with a proud look, whether it's St. George, or Repulse, or Renown, they definitely couldn't enter this place to protect your safety at close range right now. Ah, that's good. The topic was slightly awkward, so Hugo thought for a long time before managing to squeeze out a not too impolite response in the following period. The two of them heard the sound of Professor McGonagall leading a group of students back to the common room from the large staircase not far away. Obviously, for the professors, the most important thing at this time was to ensure the safety of the students, rather than killing or driving away the basilisk, so they were busy evacuating the students instead of going to support Enterprise. Of course, besides protecting the students, there was another important reason why they didn't go to support Enterprise. Enterprise had only notified them, but hadn't asked for help, considering Enterprise's background as an elite Auror from the Magical Congress of the United States. The professors naturally assumed that she could hold off the basilisk alone and buy time for everyone. Someone's coming. Not long after the group of students left, Venato suddenly became alert, and Hugo also felt her entire body tense up. However, strangely, through the crack in the broken wooden door of the closet, Hugo didn't see anyone passing by in the corridor. But a few seconds later, Hugo, whose body had been strengthened, heard very faint footsteps coming from the corridor. The walker had obviously noticed it, but the structure of the corridor amplified the sound of the footsteps. I'll go out and attack first. You act according to the situation, Venato instructed Hugo through the Admiral network, and then, when the footsteps reached near the closet, she suddenly pushed the door open and rushed out. Bang! With Venato's forceful push, one of the closet doors flew directly off the frame and smashed towards the place where the footsteps came from. Then, Venato swung a cuirass in her hand and stabbed out from behind the door. Bang! Crash! Ah! After a burst of noise, a short figure appeared from the air, clutching its right arm with its left hand. Drops of blood were seeping from the place the figure's left hand was clutching and dripping onto the ground. When did Ravenclaw students become so vicious? The figure raised its head, revealing the face of Hannah Abbott. However, at this time, her eyes had changed from blue to black. With no warmth inside, just like her tone of voice. Obviously, the being in front of them shouldn't be the real Hannah Abbott, but Voldemort's diary borrowing her body. Otherwise, a second-year student could never have directly shattered the closet door in Venato's surprise attack, and then blocked her fatal blow to her spleen. This is the entrance of the school infirmary. Even if a knife is stabbed into the heart, Madame Pomfrey can save you, Venato smiled. Besides, it feels a bit comical to hear the word vicious coming from your mouth. It seems, you recognize, Avada Kedavra, Tom Riddle said as if in ordinary conversation, but halfway through his words, he suddenly raised his injured right hand and released a killing curse at Venato. Bang! With a loud crash, the green light didn't hit Venato, but hit a stone wall that suddenly rose up at the same time. Several gray crystals the size of bottle caps fell to the ground around Tom Riddle with a clatter and turned into powder. Then, one sharp stalagmite after another, as long as an arm, emerged from the floor and shot towards him. Damn it! Riddle cursed softly, but he could only change the target of the magic in his hand from Venato to the surrounding stalagmites. After all, he was only borrowing Hannah's body now, and couldn't be as smooth as he was in his own body. And these stalagmites, which looked as thick as arms, could cause him fatal damage if even one hit him. But at this time, Venato, who had been keeping in contact with Hugo through the Admiral network, suddenly seized the opportunity. She suddenly jumped up, forcibly tore a cast iron torch holder from the wall, and smashed it at Riddle. Seeing Venato's actions, Riddle had to dodge the fist-sized cast iron frame in a very embarrassing posture. As a result, the cast iron frame, like a black light, brushed past her with a whooshing sound and smashed into the ground, creating a pit the size of a wash basin. Damn it! Looking at the wash basin-sized pit, Riddle felt cold sweat break out all over his body. Because he realized that Veneto didn't seem to be as cautious as she had said before, but every move was aimed at killing from a certain point of view. Voldemort's feeling wasn't wrong. For ship girls, the safety of the Admiral is the most important thing when going out on missions with the Admiral, and ship girls don't care about the lives of others, and this also hit Riddle's weakness at once, because he believed that his current advantages were only two. One of them was that after being attached to someone else's body, he had extremely strong concealment and was basically impossible to be discovered, and the other was that even if he was discovered, his current situation of being attached to someone else's body would make the wizard who was his opponent hesitate for a fear of hurting the innocent. But now, these two advantages had completely disappeared in the face of Veneto. Being able to ambush and block people in this place showed that Veneto had already seen through his identity, and now her every move showed that she didn't care about the lives of innocents at all. So, Riddle was really scared now. Because as the murderer who killed his father and grandfather's family back then, he could clearly see that Veneto wasn't bluffing, but really didn't care about human life. But in battle, any distraction can become a fatal problem. Just as Riddle was shocked by Veneto's reckless fighting style, Hugo successfully seized the opportunity to throw 3 runa stones at his feet in an instant. The stone floor under Riddle's feet turned into a quagmire, causing him to stagger and the magic he was preparing in his hand to be interrupted. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Veneto immediately stepped forward and violently grabbed Hannah's chest and abdomen from top to bottom. Riddle, who couldn't dodge, immediately had a huge tear in his robe. Then, a black-covered book fell out of the tear. Hannah's eyes rolled back, and she fell backward. Chapter 213, Destroying the Horcrux. She collapsed. Hugo and Veneto remained vigilant even as Hannah suddenly fell to the ground. After Hugo cast a stunning spell, they cautiously prepared to check on her. Just then, the door of the hospital wing creaked open, and Madame Pomfrey emerged, wand raised, a tense expression on her face. What happened here? Madame Pomfrey asked, her eyes sweeping over the wreckage in the corridor before settling on Hugo and Veneto. Hannah seemed to be controlled by some kind of dark magic artifact. She suddenly attacked us, but luckily, we were warned by Professor Halsey and were on guard, so we weren't caught off guard. Hugo pointed to the Horcrux of Voldemort lying on the ground. This book should be that dangerous dark magic artifact. She fainted after it fell from her person. In reality, even Voldemort's Horcrux wasn't that fragile. It was just that the killing curse that missed its target had been too taxing for Voldemort, who hadn't completed the final step of fully resurrecting through murder. That's why he seemed so weak in the subsequent attacks, and Hugo and Veneto easily beat him into his current dormant state. Having understood the basic situation, Madame Pomfrey immediately busied herself. She conjured a pair of tongs for Hugo and Veneto to place the book into a heavy silver box she retrieved from the hospital wing. Then, with a wave of her wand, she levitated Hannah and gently moved her to an empty bed in the hospital wing because the castle was on alert. Madame Pomfrey simply had Hugo and Veneto stay in the hospital wing to avoid trouble until the alert was lifted. It was then that they noticed Madame Pomfrey, who usually quickly identified and treated injuries, was unusually silent when examining Hannah, her wand movements becoming increasingly rapid. Bookworm benefits: read books to get cash or coins, and win iPhones, Switches, and more. Follow the VX public account, Bookworm Basecamp, to claim. Hannah, how is she? Veneto asked as Madame Pomfrey solemnly lowered her wand. The situation is not good. Madame Pomfrey shook her head and sighed. This child is clearly losing life force, and I can't find where it's going. Although the process is slow, it could be life-threatening if it can't be stopped. I think she might need to be sent to St. Mungo's Hospital for magical maladies and injuries. I think that dark magic artifact might be draining her life. Before Madame Pomfrey could finish, the hospital wing door opened, and Enterprise entered, her clothes slightly disheveled, with 2 second-year Hufflepuff girls floating behind her. You mean this book? After Enterprise and the others settled the 2 injured students, Madame Pomfrey opened the silver box, revealing Voldemort's Horcrux diary. That's right, it's this. After waving her wand over the diary a few times, Enterprise turned to look at Hugo and Veneto. When you were fighting Hannah, did you notice anything unusual? After Enterprise asked the question, Veneto and Hugo immediately began to describe their feelings during the battle. Of course, their words simply pointed in one direction. The Hannah they fought was almost a completely different person from the Hannah they knew. The situation is now very clear. Our Hannah Abbott seems to have come into contact with a very rare dark magic artifact that not only absorbs her life force but can even directly control Hannah when the power balance reaches a certain point. What should we do next? Madame Pomfrey asked anxiously. As a healer, she excelled at treating various injuries and illnesses, but she was not as specialized in dark arts defense as professionals like Enterprise. Simple. Find and destroy the dark magic artifact causing this. We've already completed the most difficult part of the process. As Enterprise said, these kinds of dark magic artifacts used to harm people are often extremely well hidden. The most troublesome part of solving these problems is finding them, but now that the book is here, all that's left is to destroy the notebook completely. However, the subsequent destruction was not going smoothly, because neither fire, physical destruction, nor corrosive magic could cause significant damage to the notebook. Instead, Madame Pomfrey noticed that the notebook's rate of life force extraction from Hannah increased dramatically when they attempted to destroy it. It seems we have to destroy this notebook in one go. Realizing the special connection between Hannah and the notebook, Enterprise immediately stopped everyone's experiments and pulled a basilisk fang from her robes, stabbing it forcefully into the notebook with a terrible, prolonged, ear-piercing scream. Ink gushed from the diary, flowing down the black cover to the bottom of the silver box. Then everything fell silent, and only the sound of ink still dripping from the diary could be heard. The basilisk venom had burned a hole through the diary, which was still hissing with black smoke. Just then, Hannah lying on the bed groaned. Everyone immediately turned to look at the bed and saw Hannah propping herself up on her elbow. As she first looked around at the surroundings and the four people standing by the bed, then focused her attention on Enterprise, who was holding the snake fang and looking slightly disheveled, and the smoking notebook in the silver box in front of her. Everyone. I'm so sorry for what I've done this year. Looking at the classmates and professors surrounding her, Hannah shivered, gasped, and burst into tears. After I accidentally obtained this notebook from the leaky cauldron during the summer vacation, I slowly realized something was wrong, especially after the first attack. I found I couldn't remember where I was at that time, and I couldn't figure out where the blood on my chest came from. Then why didn't you tell the professors? Madame Pomfrey asked, somewhat puzzled. I think the professors should be able to solve the problem you're facing. I wanted to, but every time I wanted to find a professor to report the problem, I would lose consciousness, and when I regained consciousness, I would be in another place. Worse, I found that my roommates seemed to be controlled too, and sometimes they would take the notebook out to do things, and although I was conscious at that time, I could only do things like a puppet. I will definitely be expelled. At this point, Hannah covered her face and cried loudly. Since Hogwarts was founded, the children of the Abbott family, as long as they are wizards, will study here, but now I am sure to leave. What will my family say about me then? Chapter 214 Summary. Rest assured, Miss Abbott, the school won't expel you because of something like this, especially since you weren't the one doing these bad things. Headmaster Dumbledore walked in from the hospital wing entrance amidst Hannah's sobs. Albus, you're back, Madame Pomfrey exclaimed in a surprised whisper upon seeing Dumbledore enter. Yes, I'm back. Dumbledore directed his traveling cloak to fly onto the coat rack, and then said, after seeing the threatening messages in the corridors, everyone thought the Abbott girl was going to be killed, so the vast majority of the school board members joined together to write to me, urging me to return quickly, but it seems now that I arrived slightly late. Fortunately, the outcome is good. With the help of Miss Halsey, Miss Veneto, and Mr. Granger, we have successfully resolved the problem and saved Miss Abbott's life. I think we also saved Colin Creevey's life. After reviewing all the events that had occurred in his mind, Hugo finally understood what Voldemort had intended to do today. The basilisk upstairs was just used to create chaos and attract everyone's attention, while the real purpose of the mastermind was to kill Colin Creevey, the only one who saw his face. Based on my observations, the main body of that thing should be this black leather book that I destroyed. So the other party was likely to use Miss Abbott to launch an attack in this place and disguise it as some kind of accident. In that case, the result of the attack would be Colin Creevey's unfortunate death, and Miss Abbott would be seriously injured. In that situation, Miss Abbott would be able to leave Hogwarts Castle as a seriously injured person and go to St. Mungo's. Then the monster hiding in the diary would be able to leave this castle and then hide. Dumbledore said at this time, although we can't know Voldemort's specific plan yet, given his personality, it does indeed fit his usual style. Are you saying this matter is related to the Dark Lord? Madame Pomfrey's eyes widened suddenly. That's right. Dumbledore turned to a page in the notebook in his hand and pointed to the name on the title page. saying, "Few people know that Voldemort used to be called Tom Riddle. 50 years ago, at Hogwarts, I taught him personally. He disappeared after leaving school, traveling around, his footprints all over the world. Sinking deeper and deeper into the quagmire of dark magic, mixing with the most evil guys in the wizarding world. After many dangerous magical transformations, he reappeared as Voldemort. People find it hard to recognize him. Almost no one associates Voldemort with a smart, handsome head boy who used to study here, and Miss Abbott should have come into contact with this dark magic item left by Voldemort in a completely unprepared state, and then was unfortunately tempted by the dark magic left inside, and did these things. I remember now, I got this book at the Leaky Cauldron when I was shopping for school supplies before school started." As soon as Professor Dumbledore finished speaking, Hannah exclaimed in a low voice, "There were many people in the bar at that time. As a result, I accidentally bumped into a person wearing a hooded cloak, and the things in my hand fell on the ground. After picking up the things, this book appeared in my pile of books." Silly girl. You come from a pure-blood magical family. Your parents should have told you not to pick up things that don't belong to you outside. Hearing Hannah say this, Madame Pomfrey showed a puzzled expression. For wizards, many things that look very simple may carry fatal threats. Therefore, in the home education of wizards, not randomly picking up things that do not belong to oneself is a basic safety principle. I didn't know what was going on at the time. Speaking of this, Hannah frowned. After seeing this book, I felt a special familiarity with this black book, and felt that it should be my book. Ah, child, that's normal. Dumbledore smiled. After all, that is a magical item belonging to Voldemort, carrying a part of his thoughts. Many wizards older and more resourceful than you have been deceived by him, so you have not made many unforgivable mistakes in this regard. In the following time, Professor Dumbledore roughly asked Hugo and Vittorio about the details of the battle just now, and then checked the ones of the three of them, Hugo, Vittorio and Hannah, as corroboration, and then let everyone rest. He himself took Hugo to the headmaster's office to deal with the next work. After all, today's incident is considered to be the truth, and such a large basilisk corpse is lying at the entrance of the second-floor bathroom, and Hagrid is also temporarily detained in Azkaban. Therefore, there are naturally many things to do. As soon as he entered the common room, a figure pounced over. It took Hugo several seconds to see the anxious expression on his sister's face. "What were you doing just now?" Hermione asked anxiously after carefully looking Hugo up, down, left, and right. "When Professor Flitwick was counting the number of people just now, you and Vittorio weren't there. I was almost worried to death. We ran into the mastermind of this attack on the road just now, and then a conflict broke out." Hugo shrugged. "The attacker wasn't actually strong, so Vittorio and I solved the problem." "That's good, that's good." Hermione breathed a long sigh of relief. Obviously, without understanding the specific situation, she didn't think it was too dangerous a thing. "But next time, you'd better tell the professor in advance and let them solve the problem." In the afternoon, Hugo and Vittorio went to class and finished class as usual. It's just because of the dead basilisk, so news about the previous events slowly spread. Just at the end of the first class in the afternoon, Hugo, who had just finished class, found that there were obviously many more people in the corridor than usual, and almost everyone was talking about something. Big news! One of the Weasley twins rushed over and shouted to the second-year students who were walking out of the Charms classroom, "The monster in the Chamber of Secrets has been solved. Our Professor Halsey killed the basilisk that was hiding in the Chamber of Secrets before." At the same time, Hugo and Vittorio of Ravenclaw also found the real culprit who opened the Chamber of Secrets. So Professor Dumbledore has decided that after this year's Mandrakes come down and rescue the petrified victims, he will prepare a grand celebration banquet. Great, really, the matter is finally over. After hearing this news, everyone immediately started discussing it in a lively manner, and smiles appeared on their faces. After all, the successive attacks before made almost everyone in the school feel insecure, so after learning that it was safe now, the tension and anxiety that had been suppressed for several months were released all at once. So in the following time on this day, groups of students surrounded Hugo and Vittorio, hoping to know some details from them. Considering a series of situations, Hugo and Vittorio uniformly told everyone that a relic of the Dark Lord had accidentally fallen into the school, resulting in the current situation. Chapter 215 Last hours of the school year. Perhaps because this year's events concluded several weeks earlier than in the novels, the end-of-year exams were still proceeding as scheduled for Hugo. This change earned him 0.5 fate points. Although the number was small, Considering that killing the basilisk and destroying the diary had only yielded 36 fate points, 0.5 points was a decent bonus. The reason he had only earned 30-odd fate points after busying himself for so long was simple. The diary not being in Ginny's possession from the start had already granted him a portion of fate points. It was impossible to earn fate points twice for the same event during this period. Several students were summoned to Dumbledore's office for a chat. Besides the Hufflepuff victim trio and Harry, who was still unnerved by Hugo's parcel-tongue ability, Hugo and Veneto were naturally among those invited by Professor Dumbledore. Hugo found it somewhat strange that, during his conversation, Dumbledore focused almost entirely on the runestones Hugo had used in the battle. Aside from asking about some details of that day, "I suspect your headmaster has something in mind for you, and it probably has something to do with the creation of runestones," Hood suggested after they returned to the dormitory to discuss. But regardless of the specifics, judging from Dumbledore's current approach, it seems he has something good in store for you, so just wait patiently, he added. Indeed. After all the petrified victims had returned to normal, the end-of-year exams concluded. However, before this time, two events had affected the entire school. One of them was Gilderoy Lockhart's arrest by two Aurors during a Wednesday class in front of a group of fifth-year students, causing quite a stir in just half a day. Several versions of the reason for Lockhart's arrest spread throughout the school. The most widely circulated rumor claimed that Lockhart was related to the monster attacks in the Chamber of Secrets. The rumors ranked second, third, and fourth in popularity were mostly related to scandalous content, the only difference being the pairing of the characters involved. However, the 2 fate points Hugo received that evening made him realize that Lockhart's arrest was likely related to him. Indeed, the next morning, the Daily Prophet dedicated a large article to the news that Lockhart was facing a Wizengamot trial on multiple serious charges. It turned out that, after nearly a year of treatment, Glory had finally helped the American old wizard recover his memory about a month ago. Following this, the ship girls in America and England mobilized to collect evidence and filed a complaint through the Magical Congress of the United States. It must be said that, although this method took a roundabout route, it was the only effective way. Lockhart's ability to obtain the Order of Merlin, 3rd class, as a best-selling author proved that he definitely had some background power in the British magical world. It would be difficult for a foreign wizard alone to bring down such a celebrity, especially since the British Ministry of Magic, under Fudge's leadership, had been following a policy of no merit sought, but no fault desired for over a decade. Without sufficient pressure, they would likely have covered up the matter directly. However, the shipgirls had naturally anticipated this. After learning about what had happened to the American old wizard, they spent a lot of time and effort tracking down the wizards whose memories had been wiped by Lockhart, and brought them together to Britain for treatment. Therefore, shortly after the American old wizard recovered, a French witch and a German wizard also regained their memories and simultaneously filed complaints with their respective ministries of magic, along with evidence. Immediately, the British Ministry of Magic's ostrich policy was bankrupt. At this time, the second round of accusations from Britain was also delivered to the desk of the head of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement at the British Ministry of Magic. The head of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement at the British Ministry of Magic at this time was Amelia Bones, a highly talented witch and a serious and upright ministry official. So she quickly launched a secret investigation into Lockhart. Obviously, these criminal investigations were conducted in secret, so Lockhart had not heard any rumors before this. After a month of investigation, Ms. Bones confirmed that he had indeed committed multiple felonies, signed the arrest warrant, and directly sent orders to arrest Lockhart, who was giving a theatrical performance on the stage at the time. Lockhart's arrest did cause a lot of discussion on campus. However, due to his clumsy performance during the entire academic year, not many people thought he had been wronged. On the contrary, a group of Monday morning quarterbacks emerged in various colleges, using various opportunities to tell those who were willing to listen to their bragging that they had discovered this a long time ago, but did not say it out of consideration for the school's reputation. What were they doing before? Hermione turned to Hugo beside her and complained as they walked past a talkative senior Hufflepuff student. "You know, many people rely on this to realize their self-worth, so let them brag. Anyway, the listeners are just looking for fun, and not many people believe it." Hugo shrugged. "By the way, is Hagrid at home right now?" This was the afternoon of the end-of-year banquet. After hearing that Hagrid had returned to Hogwarts after being released from Azkaban and finishing his recuperation, Hugo and his friends decided to visit him. He should be at home. At this time, Hugo and the other two had already walked out of the castle gate, and Hermione pointed to Hagrid's hut and said, "Look, smoke is already coming out of his chimney." "Hey, Hagrid, has anyone been here just now?" After Hagrid welcomed them in, Hugo noticed 2 half-empty cups of tea on the table. "Harry and Ron left a few minutes ago. If you had come a little earlier, you might have met them," Hagrid said, then took out a few new cups, filled them with tea, and handed them to Hugo and his friends. "I really want to thank you this time, and of course, Professor Halsey," Hagrid said gratefully to Hugo as he handed out the tea. "Thanks to your help, I was able to get out of Azkaban. To be honest, that place was terrible. The guards there give people a feeling that they can never be happy, so after being released from Azkaban, I listened to the headmaster's advice and went to the south of France for a few weeks to bask in the sun, and only came back this morning." "Did you get any compensation, Hagrid?" Hearing Hagrid say this, Hermione asked somewhat urgently. "Although I don't know what the wizarding world is like, in our Muggle world, such wrongful arrests are compensated. No. There was no compensation at all." Hagrid shook his head helplessly. "But at least it cleared my previous suspicion of murder. From now on, at least I'm innocent in that regard." Speaking of this, Hagrid realized that Hugo and his friends were too young to tell them so many dark aspects of the adult world, so he forcibly changed the subject. "By the way, Dumbledore has agreed to let me take over Professor Kettleburn's position as the Professor of Care of Magical Creatures. This may be a major benefit brought about by clearing the record. After all, Hogwarts is the only magic school in the entire UK, and it is impossible to let someone with a criminal record come to the school as a professor. This is a good thing. You can just use your book as a textbook for everyone," Hugo said, seemingly thinking of something. After all, Hagrid's book also involved his participation in the writing work, so he naturally realized that the book he had participated in writing before was indeed suitable as a textbook. No, I found a more interesting book than mine. I will find a way to let you see that book in advance during the summer vacation." Chapter 216 End of Semester. "Don't worry, I'll try my best during the summer vacation to get Hagrid to give up using the Monster Book of Monsters as a textbook next year," Veneto said to Hugo through the Admiral network as they returned to the castle. "Putting aside the issue of destiny points, I definitely don't want a fluffy book that bites people as a textbook." The banquet that evening was exceptionally lavish, clearly to celebrate everyone solving a 1,000-year-old mystery of the castle and killing the basilisk at the banquet. Everyone was in high spirits. The arrival of an old man wearing the Order of Merlin's distinctive robes pushed the atmosphere of the entire banquet to a climax. This old man was representing the Order of Merlin to award Enterprise the First-Class Order of Merlin, and the reason for awarding this medal was that Enterprise had killed the 1,000-year-old basilisk lurking in the school and saved all the students in the school. "Enterprise seems a little too calm," Hermione whispered to Hugo, looking at the faint smile on Enterprise's face. "I think it's probably because she's been in many dangerous situations, walking between life and death, so she has very good control over her emotions." Hugo shrugged and said he couldn't exactly say that it was because Enterprise had received so many medals before that she could even make a suit of armor for herself, so she really wasn't that interested in this kind of medal. After the dinner, Hugo was about to return to the dormitory when he was stopped by Professor Flitwick, and then went to the headmaster's office with Veneto. "Sit down." Headmaster Dumbledore, sitting in a large chair, gestured for Hugo and Veneto to sit down, and then said, "I called you here today mainly to announce your rewards. To be honest, what you did before was enough to get you the Third-Class Order of Merlin. Unfortunately, our Minister of Magic believes that now is not the time to make the news about Voldemort public, so my application was not approved. Of course, this doesn't mean you won't get anything. To thank you for your contribution to the school, I represent the school in awarding you the Hogwarts Special Contribution Award." "Thank you." Hugo and Veneto bowed slightly at the same time. Although this intra-school award is not as good as the Order of Merlin, it is also the highest intra-school award that students can receive. "By the way, Mr. Granger, I have a few questions here that I need you to answer truthfully." After finishing the matter about the reward, Dumbledore suddenly asked Hugo a question. "Of course, please ask." Hearing Headmaster Dumbledore say this, Hugo immediately realized that this might be related to some of the things the headmaster had asked him before, so he immediately showed a serious expression. Relax, Dumbledore waved his hand with a smile. "These are some very simple questions, so you don't need to be so nervous. Just answer truthfully." In the next few minutes, Dumbledore began to confirm with Hugo about his knowledge of ancient runes, especially the skills of using ancient runes to make various alchemy and enchanted items. After learning that he had mastered the skills of making and enchanting simple magic weapons in just half a year, Headmaster Dumbledore showed a rather gratified smile on his face. If that's the case, then I recommend you to participate in this year's alchemy competition in the Japanese wizarding world during the summer vacation, Dumbledore said. I hope you can achieve good results in the competition, but Professor, I remember that Hogwarts 6th-year students can choose to study alchemy. Students like me who have studied for half a year will definitely not be able to compare with those 7th-year students. Hugo blurted out his inner doubts after hearing Dumbledore say this. You're right, but the problem is that this competition has prerequisites. Hearing Hugo ask this, Dumbledore showed a knowing expression, and then explained to him why he was chosen. You mean, you're going to Japan with Enterprise in the first month of summer vacation to participate in the competition? Hermione's eyes widened when she heard what Hugo said on the train back to London early the next morning. Yes, it's actually a very good opportunity, Hugo shrugged. You know, the purpose of this competition is for Nicholas Flamel's inheritance. This is also what I'm wondering. Although I admit that you seem to be more skilled than me in ancient rune alchemy, it shouldn't be so skilled that you're qualified to participate in this kind of international competition. Right, I thought so too at the time, but later I understood why I was chosen after getting the competition rules from Professor Dumbledore, Hugo said, recalling what Dumbledore said at the time, because in the qualifications for participants in this competition, Nicholas Flamel himself requires that the participants studying alchemy must not have exceeded 1 year. I think this may be because Mr. Flamel hopes to find an heir who can inherit his alchemy skills, Veneto, who was sitting next to him, said at this time. So, on the one hand, he requires that the participants must be able to demonstrate sufficient talent in alchemy, and on the other hand, he requires that the participants must not have received too much education in this area, so that they can have enough space to accept his inheritance. What you said does make sense. After listening to Veneto's guess, Hermione was silent for a few seconds, then nodded. If it were me, I definitely wouldn't like teaching students based on someone else's progress. After finishing the discussion about the summer vacation competition, the group played Exploding Snap in the carriage. Obviously, ship girls are indeed more advantageous than humans in this regard. Even if the Granger siblings teamed up, they would only win 2 or 3 out of 10 games at most. The Hogwarts Express gradually slowed down and finally stopped. You can come and play with me when your brother is away from home for 2 weeks during the summer vacation, Veneto invited Hermione as she got off the train. You know, the shop my sister runs is very close to your house, and I'm usually there during the summer vacation. Nicholas Flamel, this person actually exists. After returning home, Hugo told his parents about the summer vacation competition, which naturally surprised the Grangers. After all, Nicholas Flamel has also left his mark in the world of ordinary people. For the Grangers, the fact that their son is connected with this legendary figure is in itself a very special thing. I estimate that my chances of winning the championship in the end are not high. Hugo shook his head and said, now the team with the highest call for the championship is the Buxbottom's team. There are 6 people in the team, and they have done corresponding training before. Durmstrang is also good in this regard, and Hogwarts, in fact. If Hugo hadn't shown his ability in this area during the battle with Hannah Abbott, who was possessed by Voldemort, Dumbledore wouldn't have sent anyone to participate in this competition at all. After all, among the 3 major European schools, although Hogwarts has many strengths, its level in alchemy is very average. To give a simple example, important alchemical research in the past 100 years has mainly been contributed by students who graduated from Durmstrang and Buxbottom's, and only Headmaster Dumbledore of Hogwarts barely saved some face for the school in this regard. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 217 First arrived in Japan. Stepping off the boat, Hugo felt like he had entered a bathroom. A wave of humid, hot air rushed towards him, instantly enveloping him, especially with the sun overhead constantly releasing its light and heat. I thought Japanese summers weren't supposed to be this hot. Looking at the tropical plants around the airport, Hugo took the wet wipe Enterprise handed him and wiped his face before speaking. The mainland of Japan is indeed cooler, but this is the Ogasawara Islands. Enterprise, dressed in short denim shorts and a t-shirt, lightly touched the straw hat on her head as she spoke, then took a deep breath. It feels great to revisit this old place. This competition was being held at the Magic School's Magic Institute in Japan. Contestants only needed to arrive before the designated time, There were no restrictions on how they got there normally. For such important competitions, each school would send its own transportation to carry the contestants and promote their school. However, Hugo's selection was very rushed, and considering his age and the fact that he was a last-minute substitute, it was hard to inspire enough confidence. Therefore, the school board members didn't agree to let him use Hogwarts transportation. Luckily, those who could become school board members also knew the importance of leaving a line of retreat, so they specifically approved 200 galleons for their travel expenses. Considering that the Weasley family didn't even spend 700 galleons on their trip to Egypt, 200 galleons was more than enough for Hugo and Enterprise. Under these circumstances, Hugo and Enterprise naturally chose to fly to Tokyo and then take a boat directly to Chichijima in the Ogasawara Islands. It was less than an hour away from Minami Iwo Jima, where the Magic Institute was located. Over the next 3 days, Hugo and Enterprise thoroughly explored these tropical islands. Enterprise even took Hugo to Iwo Jima, now designated as a military restricted zone, to see the traces she had left behind. For example, a mountain artillery battery on Mount Suribachi on Iwo Jima was destroyed when Enterprise's carrier-based aircraft dropped a 500-pound bomb into it, along with some bunkers and trenches. Eventually, Enterprise even found a transport ship she had sunk in the surrounding waters and had Laurent take a picture of her with the wreckage of that ship. After completely relaxing, on the third day of their arrival, the two, having had their fill of fun, went to a deserted beach on Chichijima after lunch and lit the invitation letter with their wands as instructed. Instantly, a ball of purple flames engulfed the invitation letter written on Japanese paper, then transformed into a stream of light that shot straight into the sky, exploding into a ball of magical flames that only wizards could see. Within a few minutes, two huge figures flew over the sea surface not far away. As the two figures approached, they recognized them as two giant albatrosses. This should be the Magic Institute's unique mode of transportation. Looking at the two albatrosses landing in front of them, Enterprise said, "It's usually used to send students between the ages of 7 and 11 to and from school. Unlike other magic schools, students at the Japanese Magic Institute start attending school at the age of 7. Therefore, they also have a special day student system." Shortly after taking off, the two albatrosses brought Hugo and Enterprise to Minami Iwo Jima, the southernmost island in the Ogasawara Islands. After breaking through an invisible barrier, a palace made of what looked like white jade suddenly appeared at the very top of Minami Iwo Jima. According to the information they had seen during their travels, Minami Iwo Jima is a conical volcanic island, with a maximum altitude of 916 meters, the highest point in the Ogasawara Islands. At the same time, the summit is often surrounded by clouds and mist. The island is surrounded by sea-eroded cliffs formed by wave erosion, with an average height of 100 to 200 meters. There are almost no sandy beaches, and the surrounding underwater volcanoes make it difficult to land because the area has been designated by the Japanese government as a native natural environment conservation area. No ordinary person has set foot on the island since the last exploration 10 years ago. Now it seems that the most important reason for sealing off the island, besides protecting the environment, is that it is the location of the Japanese magic school, so the Japanese Muggle government also has to help with the secrecy. Soon, the two giant albatrosses landed in a cave on the island, and a Japanese wizard wearing a golden wizard's robe came forward to register Hugo and Enterprise. "Stop, I can speak Japanese. Let's communicate in Japanese." After hearing the Japanese man say a few sentences of Japanese-style English, Enterprise, feeling she couldn't stand it, simply spoke in Japanese. "When did you learn Japanese? It sounds almost like your mother tongue." Listening to Enterprise's conversation with the Japanese wizard, Hugo asked through the Admiral network, "I learned it in the Pacific in the 40s. After all, when fighting them, you have to be able to understand their language, otherwise you won't even be able to obtain the most basic intelligence." Obviously, Enterprise's Japanese was indeed very good, so she quickly obtained a map and led Hugo towards the room assigned to them. Due to the island's size, most of the Magic Institute's buildings were hidden within the mountains. In addition, these rooms had also been cast with a large number of space expansion spells. "It's really too easy to get lost here." After passing through another tunnel and climbing 2 flights of stairs, Hugo muttered softly, looking at the unmarked fork in the road in front of him, "There's no other way. The island is only so big. Most of the school's space is built inside the mountain, and they can only build it this way to utilize the mountain space." Enterprise looked at the map and led Hugo to the left. It was the same way on Iwo Jima back then. When our people entered the mountain, they would encounter maze-like roads. And compared to here, there were countless traps and enemies with guns ready to shoot. What Enterprise didn't say was that the attitudes of the guiding volunteers were also very strange. Some people were very enthusiastic, but others were as cold as ice, as if they had a grudge against them. Fortunately, it was summer vacation, and most of the Magic Institute students had already left, except for a few volunteers. Therefore, these tunnels seemed much more spacious. Moreover, thanks to magic, the temperature and ventilation in the cave were very good, and the enchanted windows showed the same weather as outside. Although it's not appropriate for me to say this given my identity, the internal environment of this school is much better than that castle. Hogwarts. Enterprise pulled Hugo up the escalator and commented, "At least, an old castle like Hogwarts is indeed comfortable to live in during the summer, but it's obviously not good in the winter. It's too damp and too cold." Indeed, Hugo nodded in agreement. Because of the house elves' diligence, the common room was generally quite suitable for living, but in winter, both the quarters and Snape's underground classroom were damp and cold. Finally, the two arrived at the dormitory where they would be temporarily staying for the next few days. It was a suite with 2 bedrooms and a small living room, and it looked very Japanese style. "Let's rest for an hour first, then get up and tidy up." As soon as she entered the room, Enterprise raised her hand and looked at her watch, then said, "There's a welcome banquet tonight, and all of us have to go." Chapter 218 First Game. The evening banquet was a very formal affair, and if Hugo had attended alone, he would definitely have been flustered. Fortunately, after the shipgirls had been in this world for a year or two, they had experienced many things in this regard, so they were able to guide him to perfectly handle this banquet. Indomitable's dress is indeed good. Standing in front of the mirror, Hugo looked at the dress robe that Indomitable had stuffed into his luggage before departure, and a satisfied expression appeared on his face after turning around a few times. This was a set of dark blue dress robes, incorporating some features of naval dress uniforms, so it looked significantly more fitted than ordinary dress robes, making him appear more mature than his actual age. Of course it's good. This is the result of our collective design. At this moment, Enterprise pushed the door open and came in, then helped Hugo tidy up his clothes while saying she had already changed her clothes at this time, wearing a silver gray dress robe also with an officer uniform style, with a first-class Order of Merlin badge hanging on her chest. Of course, at the end of their preparations, they each took out a Hogwarts school badge made of gold enamel and hung it on the left chest of their dress robes to show their origins. After simply tidying up their clothes, they followed a tunnel inside the mountain towards the palace located on the top of the mountain. They had once had a bird's eye view of this palace. When they arrived, this palace looked very conspicuous from the air because the main body of the building was made of mutton fat jade, looking like a gorgeous and exquisite pagoda. It had a clear visual contrast with the cyan gray island below. As an ancient school, the Magic Institute's auditorium reflected a strong historical heritage. Whether it was the various sculptures, paintings on the building stones, or the tables, chairs, bonsai, and even the tableware in the auditorium, they all reflected a unique cultural style because alchemy itself belonged to a very niche discipline in the wizarding world, and the requirements for participants in this competition were very strict. There were not many people participating when the banquet officially began. He found that although the participants came from North Africa, Europe, and the Americas, all the participants added up didn't even reach 40 people. Actually, holding this competition here is also out of necessity, just as the headmaster of the Magic Institute, representing the host, began to deliver a welcome speech. Enterprise whispered to Hugo through the Admiral network, "As the creator of the only known Philosopher's Stone, Nicholas Flamel has a very high status in alchemy, so the entire Western magic world wants his legacy. Therefore, the International Confederation of Wizards, or rather, the Western Wizarding International Confederation of Wizards, argued for a long time about the location of this competition, because each country's Ministry of Magic wanted to put the competition in their own country, but other countries would all object. So after about a month of arguing, everyone finally decided to hold this competition in Japan. Located in the neutral zone between the International Confederation of Wizards and the Zhuxia Magic Alliance, the Zhuxia Magic Alliance is a magic cooperation organization located in the east. In the earliest era of the Wizard Council, wizards from all over the world were unified under this banner. However, when the stricter International Statute of Wizarding Secrecy was announced in 1692 and the International Confederation of Wizards was established, many countries and regions raised objections in this regard. Among them, countries like Liechtenstein and Switzerland, although suppressed by the overall environment, had to acknowledge the Statute of Secrecy. However, They refused to join the International Confederation of Wizards and declared their permanent neutrality in the Far East and Southeast Asia. It was another matter. Here, there was a completely different magic system from the Western world and equally ancient magic communities, and the overall strength was not inferior to the entire Western magic world. So after realizing that the International Statute of Wizarding Secrecy did not meet their needs, they established an organization called the Hugo Magic Alliance and promulgated a similar but very different statute of secrecy according to their own circumstances. And the Wizards of Japan, for a series of reasons, first remained neutral, and then joined both organizations at the end of the 19th century. Also because of this reason, whether it is the International Confederation of Wizards or the Hugo Magic Alliance, when they want to hold any activities, they will choose Japan as the venue to show fairness. Due to this situation, the headmaster of the Magic Institute can be considered experienced in these tasks. After his welcome speech ended, the representative from the International Confederation of Wizards also gave a simple speech. The content of the two speeches was very concise, so they didn't even last 15 minutes in total. Soon, all the speeches ended, and the banquet officially began, probably to cater to the tastes of guests who had come from afar. Most of the dishes on the table were Western style, and the few Japanese dishes were also chosen to be more universally acceptable. For example, foods similar to various sashimi or some sushi like raw foods were not placed on the table, and the dishes were not served according to the Japanese cuisine portion for everyone. Fortunately, because there were few people participating in the competition, and wizards who had mastered alchemy in the wizarding world often had a higher social status, the dishes at the banquet were indeed delicious. It seems that everyone is focusing on those Boxburton students. Looking at the International Confederation of Wizards official who had just bypassed him and chatted with a leading professor of the Boxburton's delegation, Hugo said unhappily to Enterprise in a low voice, "There's no way. Who made the entire alchemy center of the Mediterranean region now in Boxburton's?" Enterprise shrugged helplessly. Not to mention that Nicholas Flamel and his wife are all Boxburton's graduates, so for this competition, most wizards believe that the winner of this competition will definitely come from Boxburton's, just not sure who the final winner will be. Receive red envelope, cash or coin. Red envelopes have been distributed to your account. Follow the WeChat official account, Book Friends Basecamp, to receive them. In addition, many Japanese wizards who helped serve the dishes also had cold faces, making people feel a little unhappy. The taste of being ignored was not very good, so not long after the last dish of the banquet came up, except for the Boxburton's contestants, almost all the remaining contestants left as soon as they finished eating. Of course, there was another important reason why everyone left directly after eating, and that was that the first competition would start at 10 a.m. the next morning, so everyone hoped to do some preparation tonight. Early the next morning, Hugo and Enterprise came to the hall where the banquet was held yesterday. The long tables used for the banquet before had been removed, and replaced with many single small tables, all facing the main stage at the end of the hall. The first exam is a written test to examine your breadth of knowledge of various alchemy knowledge. After everyone was seated, the official from the International Confederation of Wizards said on the main stage, "Now everyone start answering the questions. You have 2 hours to use." After speaking, the middle-aged wizard turned a huge hourglass on the table in front of him upside down and placed it aside, then waved his wand. In an instant, test papers, quills, ink bottles, and rolls of parchment appeared on the tables. After hearing the order, all the contestants immediately picked up the test papers and pens that had just appeared on the table, preparing to begin the first round of the competition. Chapter 219 Game 2. After the test paper appeared on the desk, Hugo flipped through it quickly. He found that he had mastered most of the content, with only a few knowledge points causing some problems. These problems weren't because he was completely ignorant of the content, but because the questions leaned towards practical application. And both Salem and Indomitable, who imparted knowledge to him, each had their own methods. Use Indomitable's methods, Enterprise said to him through the Admiral network after learning of Hugo's inner doubts. The skills Salem possesses have obvious American characteristics, and the judges for this competition are mainly from Europe. So, it's better to use popular European techniques as much as possible in front of the judges. "How do you think I did on the test just now?" Hugo asked through the Admiral network as soon as he left the examination room. "I feel like I wrote down everything I know, but I still feel like something is missing. Rest assured, my dear Admiral. Your answers to those questions were very good." Indomitable's voice appeared in Hugo's ear. "Although the answers weren't perfect, I can guarantee a high score." Actually, when Hugo was taking the test, the ship girls were constantly watching him in a live broadcast, except the ship girls almost kept silent all the time. The reason for this was that this theoretical exam was just a qualification exam after all. Hugo's overall alchemy level was very average because he was a beginner. If the theoretical exam results differ too greatly from the practical operations, he could easily be seen as someone with high aspirations but low abilities, or even a cheater. That's right. Although he could make runestones and access a massive amount of alchemy-related information, these points didn't mean he had mastered profound alchemy skills, since alchemy itself is a discipline that focuses on practice. Hugo, who can only make runestones and some simple alchemical products, is currently only at a relatively low level in alchemy. Of course, because of the strange rules of the competition, the overall alchemy level of the participants wasn't high. And the competition organizers were obviously aware of this. For example, the questions just now didn't pose any profound problems in terms of difficulty. It's just that the scope of the questions was relatively broad, covering most of the common knowledge points. As for why this was the case, it's very simple. Although this competition looks very formal, it's actually just a test used by Nicholas Flamel to select a successor to his knowledge in this context. The scores of these exams or competitions can only serve as a reference at most. The key to winning the competition is to meet Nicholas Flamel's requirements. Therefore, Hugo didn't have much confidence in winning the competition, because for someone who has lived from hundreds of years ago to the present, no one can know what his standards are in this regard as long as he doesn't reveal his thoughts in this situation. The best way for the participants is to show themselves as much as possible. Then, pray that the greatest alchemist since the Middle Ages will take a liking to them. As for the first exam, it's estimated that besides warming everyone up, the only purpose was to filter out some guys who weren't skilled enough and had a shaky foundation but came to fill the numbers. Sure enough, when everyone was having breakfast early the next morning, the results of the first competition were already out. Except for 3 contestants who had obvious flaws in their fundamentals and were eliminated, everyone else entered the next round of the competition. I'm very happy to see that the vast majority of you are still here. Unlike the previous competition, the second competition is a practical competition, and you will have a week to complete it. After finishing breakfast, the official from the International Confederation of Wizards said to the participants who passed the first competition on the podium. He waved his wand, and a box appeared in front of them. For the next competition, your task is this golden egg. The official pointed the wand at the keyhole of the box. With a click, the lock on the box opened, revealing more than 20 metal eggs the size of goose eggs inside. Over the next week, what you have to do is use alchemical techniques to open these metal eggs and take out the contents inside. During this process, each of you will have 200 galleons for materials. Anyone who fails to complete the task after the deadline or after spending all the money will be eliminated from this competition. During the competition, you can only stay in the designated room to complete this competition independently and cannot communicate with outsiders. However, you will receive a book list, and you can borrow the books on it to find information at a price of 5 galleons per book. After announcing the content of the competition, some students volunteers from the magic school who stayed on campus led these participants into their respective rooms, and then used magic to seal these doors. Besides automatically opening after a week, the door can be opened by the participants inside at any time, but once it is opened, it is equivalent to announcing automatic failure. This is better than I imagined. After the door was sealed, Lorenzen immediately checked the room where he would be staying for the next week and found that the overall level of this room was very good. The entire room consists of a standard alchemy lab, a living room, and a washroom with shower and toilet facilities at the same time. On the dining table in the living room, there is also a magical menu. As long as you say the food and drinks you want to the menu, those things will soon appear on the small dining table. After trying to order a glass of juice and drinking it, Hugo immediately started his work. After placing the golden egg on an analysis magic circle on the alchemy table and activating it, a large number of white runes immediately appeared on the golden egg. Locking, concealing, fixing, fusing. Hugo quickly took out paper and pen and quickly recorded these runes. There were many and miscellaneous, but the overall difficulty wasn't high for him. Solving it just required a lot of time. It can be done in 3 days. After recording all the runes on the golden egg and analyzing them, Hugo breathed a sigh of relief because this question wasn't too difficult for him. Although there were several traps in those runes, these traps didn't escape his eyes. Under his careful observation in the following time, he quickly exchanged the materials from the material list. Then, he began to try to remove the seal on the golden egg just like untangling a complex ball of thread. He only needed to follow a certain pattern to crack those runes one by one. This is the last rune. on the afternoon of the third day. After engraving ancient runic runes on a silver plate with a small pocket knife and filling the grooves with a mixture of mercury and sulfur to cast a spell, Hugo placed the prepared silver plate on the last few runes remaining on the golden egg. As soon as the two runes came into contact, a light flashed from the point of contact. In an instant, whether it was the runes on the golden egg or the runes on the silver plate, they all disappeared. Then, the surface of the golden egg, which had now become smooth, began to crack little by little. Finally, the entire eggshell suddenly opened like a flower, revealing the things placed inside the egg. Chapter 220 Trap. What is this thing? Inside the golden egg was a sealed glass vial, only slightly larger than a capsule. At first, Hugo thought the vial was empty, but when he brought his eyes close to the vial, he discovered a grain of white stone, smaller than a sesame seed. At the bottom of the perfectly sealed glass it looked somewhat transparent and emitted a rainbow-like glow, like a tiny opal, displaying a very beautiful color. This is a secondary philosopher's stone, Indomitable quickly sensed and concluded through the Admiral network, using Hugo as a medium. This should be a philosopher's stone, or rather, a failed form of it. Then what is this thing good for? This kind of thing is an expensive consumable that can convert lead into silver. For example, the philosopher's stone in your hand, about the size of a grain of sand, can convert a full 5 pounds of lead into silver. 5 pounds, Hugo exclaimed in surprise, taking the vial closer to his eyes to examine it carefully. No wonder alchemists can make so much money. This is just a failed product. No one would deliberately manufacture such a thing to convert silver, Indomitable said, shaking her head. Because the cost of making this thing is much higher than the value of the silver it can convert, but a successful philosopher's stone is not like that. It can not only convert a certain amount of gold every day without any cost, but also be used to make a large number of alchemical potions. Speaking of this, Indomitable's tone gradually became excited. To give a simple example, in addition to being used to make elixirs of life, this top-level product of alchemy can greatly shorten the production cycle and reduce the difficulty of making most magical potions. For example, with a philosopher's stone, the brewing process of Felix Felicis can be shortened from half a year to a mere 7 days, while the difficulty and side effects are reduced to about 1/10 of the original. Sounds absolutely amazing. At this point, Hugo suddenly thought of a conjecture he had seen in a fanfiction in his previous life. By the way, do you think the philosopher's stone can enhance combat power or spellcasting? Why would you think that? Indomitable asked, puzzled by Hugo's words. The philosopher's stone is indeed one of the highest achievements of alchemy, but that doesn't mean it's suitable for combat or spellcasting. Just like we all know that lithography machines have huge applications in many fields, but even the best lithography machine is not as lethal as a handgun on the battlefield. Then why didn't either of the two Dark Lords' rises involve trying to rob Nicholas Flamel's philosopher's stone? And I remember when Grindelwald tried to attack Paris with fiend fire, it was Nicholas Flamel who stopped him. That's easy to explain. Hearing Hugo's words, Indomitable finally understood why the Admiral would think that way, but the actual situation was different from what he said. Regarding the first question, although the philosopher's stone cannot improve spellcasting ability, it can improve the alchemist's alchemical abilities. In this case, Nicholas Flamel only needs to use alchemy to hide his hiding place where no one can find it, and he can naturally avoid the harassment of those people. More importantly, on the path to conquering death, Grindelwald chose the Deathly Hallows, while Voldemort chose Horcruxes. Therefore, neither of them focused on Nicholas Flamel. This is also why Nicholas Flamel chose to leave his hometown of Paris and move to Surrey after Voldemort's first defeat, because he knew from Dumbledore that Voldemort would one day return like lightning. And Voldemort, who wanted to be resurrected at that time, would naturally target him. Therefore, knowing that he could not face the Dark Lord head-on, Nicholas Flamel left his homeland of France and came to England, in order to protect himself and his wife with Dumbledore's reputation. As for the attack in Paris, it's also very simple. Nicholas Flamel did play an irreplaceable role in that disaster. But that role was not in his powerful spellcasting ability, but in using his powerful ability to perform an alchemy, merging the power of different people present to prevent a catastrophe from happening. In other words, contrary to what most people speculate, the most important role he played at the time was not contributing magic power, but harmonizing the power of so many people present. So that's how it is. After understanding the question that had been bothering him, Hugo felt much happier. Then, he picked up the golden egg in his hand and began to examine it. This was originally just a routine inspection, but Hugo quickly discovered something in the golden egg that surprised him. I feel like something is wrong with this thing, Hugo muttered softly, looking at a base at the bottom of the golden egg. The base looked like a stamen and was used to secure the vial just now, but when Hugo examined this area, he was surprised to find that the magic he used for detection could not penetrate this structure, which was slightly smaller than a billiard ball. Obviously, this thing was also likely to be a container. And after recalling the rules announced before the competition, Hugo also realized that they said to take out the thing inside the golden egg, but they never said that there was only one thing inside the golden egg. It seems that the second task is not as simple as I thought, Hugo nodded subconsciously. In addition to testing the alchemical abilities of the participants, it will also test a series of their qualities. For example, breaking the magic on the eggshell at the beginning was a test of patience and basic operational skills because the difficulty of dispelling the rune arrays on the eggshell was not high, but the large number and the connection between different runes required the person dispelling these runes to be proficient enough in practical operation and have a solid foundation. And now, this hidden container is a test of the participants' attention to detail. If anyone is careless and thinks they have completed the task by taking out the vial, they will probably be eliminated directly. Let me see how to open this thing. After sighing slightly at the challenge designed by the organizers, Hugo began to study the metal container. However, unlike before, after placing the whole thing on the alchemy table, no runes appeared on the surface of the item. Instead, a line of Latin appeared. To open me, you need the greatest power. Luckily, I know it. Recognizing the words, Hugo breathed a sigh of relief. Although there are Latin dictionaries available for exchange, knowing it like him can obviously save a lot of time. Send 888 cash red envelopes. Follow VX, public account, book friends Basecamp, read popular masterpieces, and draw 888 cash red envelopes. But soon Hugo fell into deep thought, because this hint was too vague. And it could even be said that it was no different from saying nothing. Fiend fire? Avada Kedavra? Time. Hugo fell into deep thought. If a powerful force could still give people an idea, then the greatest simply left people with no clue, because the question of what the greatest power is not a new question. At least since 1,000 years ago, this question has been circulating in the magical world, but the problem is that, until today, no consensus answer has been discussed for this question. Chapter 221 Parsing and Analysis. After racking his brains for a while, staring at the completely sealed metal container, Hugo suddenly realized that he had gotten into a dead end in his thinking, because he realized that this was, after all, an exam, and the examinees were a group of pure novices who had been exposed to alchemy for no more than a year, so it was impossible to pose a question that even the most powerful wizards in history could not answer accurately to test them. In other words, in this sentence, the so-called most powerful force should be a general term, and a force that most people can master or understand, Hugo thought. However, after pondering for a few minutes, he suddenly had a flash of inspiration and went to the table to pick up the book list placed on the table to observe, because he suddenly thought that although he was the youngest of these contestants, the oldest of the contestants was less than 17 years old, so everyone would definitely not be able to be comprehensive in terms of knowledge reserves. Therefore, the books listed in this book list must have something to do with how to open this metal container. Otherwise, the event organizers would not put these things here as decorations. I think your guess should be right. Indomitable's voice rang in the Admiral network. At least the first question is not too difficult for most wizards who have solidly studied alchemy for more than half a year. There may be many people who cannot complete these tasks within the specified time because they are slow or stupid, but for most people, this level of knowledge does not require them to search for additional information. Realizing this, Hugo immediately began to analyze this book list, and soon he found something very interesting on the book list: the essence of magic. Why would such a purely theoretical book appear in this place? And this book is the kind that I have never seen before. Not only have you never seen it, my dear Admiral, Indomitable said to him through the Admiral network after being stunned for a few seconds after seeing the title of this book, I can guarantee that this book has never appeared on the market at all. What? Hugo's face immediately showed a surprised expression when he heard this, because he knew that Indomitable could be said to be well read in this regard. If she had never seen it, it meant that these books must be very rare. That's right, this must be a very important book. You must go and see it. Indomitable's voice became hurried. Anyone who dares to give this book such a name is either a madman or a true master, and I think in this kind of competition, they shouldn't put a madman's book here, so you must take a look at that book. Understood? Hugo nodded slightly, then took out his wand and gently tapped the name of the book. A few seconds later, with a slight crackling sound, A book appeared on the table the first time Hugo saw these books. He realized that he had found a treasure, because the book from the cover to the inside paper was all made of dragon skin, and there were also some special alchemical powers used to preserve the book. After spending an hour on inspection, Hugo finally uploaded all the contents of this book to the Admiral network. However, unlike what he had imagined, there was no detailed content about alchemical methods in this book, but rather the results of research on the most core part of alchemy and some guidance on major directions. This must be something written by an alchemy master, or even Nicholas Flamel himself, Indomitable said very seriously. Because the core of this entire book is that magic is actually a pure power that comes from the heart. For example, you know the transfiguration spell? Indomitable immediately gave an example to explain after seeing that his admiral seemed a little confused after listening to what he said. If we remove magic, turning one thing into another is itself a very strange thing, because it completely violates the physical principles we know. What you said makes sense. Hugo also reacted at this time. Unlike the purely materialistic world of his previous life, this world has elements of idealism. And magic is a prominent manifestation of idealism. For example, the spells cast by wizards around the world often have the same effect, but their incantations, gestures, and even tools are not the same, and there are no rules in this. And although alchemy looks close to rigorous scientific experiments, in fact, there are also a large number of black boxes in it, and these black boxes cannot be analyzed at all. However, according to the theory in the book, these technical black boxes are actually not black boxes at all, but a special manifestation of the power of the heart leveraging reality. Is this the legendary mind over matter, psionic ascension, under the explanation of Indomitable and Salem? Hugo initially understood these knowledge that was completely beyond his age, and it was in this situation that Hugo realized what the line on the metal container meant. If magic comes from the power of the heart, then this so-called most powerful force should refer to the power originating from the caster's heart. Speaking of this, Hugo suddenly thought of something in the original novel. Dumbledore has been proclaiming that love is a powerful force. There is indeed an idea of establishing a correct outlook on life for Harry, but in fact, it also implicitly states a certain fact about magic. In other words, to open this metal container, you need some kind of magic that contains your own will. Finally, Hugo finally thought of a way to open this container. Let me think about which spell is better: the Killing Curse, the Cruciatus Curse, the Imperious Curse, and the Fiendfire Curse are all spells of this kind. Indomitable's voice rang in the Admiral network, and it is because of this reason that these spells have a power far stronger than other spells. You're right, but the problem is that this is a competition. After listening to the examples given by Indomitable, Hugo felt quite speechless. If I dare to use these recognized dark magic, it's a small matter if I can't win the competition. I think there's a high probability that a group of Japanese law enforcement officers will rush in at the door and put me in a Japanese wizard prison to sing Iron Window Tears. Then we only have one way: learn the Patronus charm. Enterprise's voice squeezed into the Admiral network at this time. Compared to those dangerous curses, only this curse is safer. Are you kidding me? Hugo didn't quite agree with Enterprise's suggestion. He admits that he is now much stronger than most of his peers in terms of spellcasting, but top-level curses like summoning a Patronus are definitely not something that can be learned in the remaining 4 days. You must know that not many adults in the British wizarding world have mastered this magic. I'm not kidding. Enterprise said very seriously. Of course, I don't expect you to be able to summon a corporeal Patronus, because this is a very unrealistic idea, but it shouldn't be difficult to just reach the level of summoning some silver mist. Chapter 222. The second game ended. The Patronus charm is often regarded as a kind of defense, a spell specifically targeting Dementors. Enterprise's voice echoed through the Admiral network. Because of this perception, after the British Ministry of Magic brought the Dementors under its command, the dissemination of this magic began to be deliberately restricted, to prevent wizards from harming Ministry employees. But in reality, the application of this charm is much broader than people imagine. It can be said that when facing most dark magic that can cause negative effects, the Patronus charm can play a positive role. So, what is the core of activating this magic? Is it happy memories, as Lupin said? Hugo asked. Lupin is right, but not entirely, Enterprise replied earnestly. Accurately speaking, all positive and active emotions can be used to activate this charm. However, compared to other emotions, the power from happiness is easier for people to grasp, especially since Harry was only in his 3rd year when Lupin taught him. So, naturally, he chose the simplest method, but in fact, the best emotion to activate this magic is the belief in protecting something. After all, the magic is called the Patronus charm, so the most fitting emotion is naturally protection. Just like using fiend fire requires the emotion of destroying everything to drive it. Okay, I roughly understand what's going on, Hugo nodded. I will learn this magic in the short time ahead. Following Enterprise's instructions, Hugo first borrowed a booklet about learning the Patronus charm from the book list, and then practiced it bit by bit, expecto patronum. After adjusting his mindset, Hugo filled his heart with a desire to protect his family and ship girls, and then recited the incantation. As soon as he finished reciting the incantation, something suddenly spurted out of the end of his wand at a rapid pace, looking like a wisp of silver gas. Very good, this is a very good start. Enterprise's voice rang out in the Admiral network. At least in Patronus charm learning, it is very rare for someone to cause the wand to react on their first try. This also shows that although the avatars used in the previous enhancements were not related to magic, simply stacking soul strength can significantly enhance your magical talent. Expecto patronum. After recalling the problems he had discovered during the spellcasting just now, Hugo cast the charm again, only this time his target was the metal container. More than twice as much silver gas as before flew out of the wand tip and merged into the container. Then Hugo felt the seal on the container loosen. That's right, this problem-solving approach is correct, but the type of magic used must reach a certain intensity. Seeing the magical protection on the container quickly recover, Hugo nodded and continued practicing. Obviously, casting this magic in a safe and comfortable room is much easier than facing dementors. In addition, Hugo could also use the entire Admiral network internally to accelerate learning. Therefore, by noon on the third day, he was already able to release a large cloud of silver mist, while also being able to keep this cloud of mist around him for a period of time. Now it should be possible, Hugo thought as he watched the silver mist disappear into the air. Then he pointed the wand in his hand at the metal container and chanted, Expecto patronum. This time, the metal container, having absorbed enough silver mist, began to change. First, the magic cast on the container earlier disappeared one by one, and then the container itself turned into a cloud of golden mist and dissipated into the air. And after the mist dissipated, a piece of paper that looked as if it was covered in some kind of grease appeared where the container had been. Count up 5 tiles, then count 3 tiles horizontally from the left, and then tap 3 times with a wand. Looking at the piece of paper, Hugo was stunned for a moment, and then immediately took the paper and walked into the bathroom. After all, these buildings in the Magic Academy were all carved directly from the rock inside the mountain. And in this situation, the only place with bricks or something similar to bricks was the tiles in the bathroom. Sure enough, after he followed the instructions on the paper and tapped the tile on the wall facing the bathroom with his wand, a cracking sound came from the room. Walking out of the bathroom, he found that the cabinet in the alchemy laboratory used to store various items began to slowly move to the side, revealing a small door that could allow one person to pass through. 5 days, 12 hours, and 17 minutes, Hugo Granger from Hogwarts. Following the signs along the tunnel with many forks, Hugo heard a voice from the side. At this time, Hugo found himself standing in a brightly lit small auditorium. And on the platform in the center of this auditorium stood 2 Japanese wizards who looked expressionless and gloomy. One of the wizards was holding a large gold watch, and the other was holding a scroll of paper and outlining something on it with a brush. Hello, what should I do next? Looking at the several doors around the auditorium, Hugo politely asked the 2 wizards in Japanese, just go out through that golden door. Your team leader should have been notified and is waiting for you in the outer auditorium. After hearing Hugo speak Japanese, the 2 Japanese wizards' attitude immediately improved a lot. Thank you. After thanking them, Hugo followed the path pointed out by the 2 wizards and walked into the golden door. After walking up and down and twisting and turning through the tunnel for 5 or 6 minutes, he finally arrived at the auditorium on the top of the mountain where the welcome banquet had been held before. You are the 3rd one to come out. Before you, there was an Egyptian and a Volksbünden student. Enterprise was already waiting here at this time, and then told him about the previous situation. Besides that, a Durmstrang student was disqualified from the competition because he used fiend fire but couldn't extinguish it, resulting in a rather dangerous small fire. That sounds pretty bad, Hugo shrugged, and then asked a question. By the way, what is the content of the next competition? The event organizers haven't given any notice on this point. They just asked everyone to wait for notification after the process is over. Enterprise took out a booklet from his body, glanced at it, and said, but I think in a few days, after the 2nd game is completely over, we should be able to know what the content of the next game is. Okay, got it, So what do we do for the next 2 days? Looking at the more than 1 day of free time on the schedule, Hugo began to plan his next actions. We can go read some books. Although the Magic Academy hasn't opened their restricted section to us, we can read ordinary books as much as we want. Seizing any spare time for learning is a very good thing, and Hugo himself quite likes reading. So Enterprise's suggestion is a very valuable suggestion for him. Chapter 223 Through and Purchase. Dear Dad, Mom, and Sister, I'm doing very well here in Japan. I've successfully completed 2 competition events, and the overall results are very good. Professor Halsey is taking great care of me, and the organizers are also doing their best to provide logistics for every participant, so I don't have to worry about food, clothing, accommodation, or transportation here because I've finished the competition content ahead of schedule. I've been reading in the library during my free time these past few days. During this process, I discovered some interesting things in the library of the Japanese magic school. Under normal circumstances, the books used by wizards are usually written in their native language, but the Japanese magic school is completely different in this regard. For example, in the ordinary section of the library, only 1/3 of the books are purely in Japanese, while the remaining 2/3 are half in Chinese and half in English, but all have Japanese translations and annotations next to them. Oh, right, now there's only the last competition left. According to the organizers, during this time, we will have several days to sightsee and shop in the Japanese magical world, so if you have anything you want, you can write to me and let me know. When the time comes, I can help you buy some things that you can't buy on our side. I hope to return and reunite with you as soon as possible. Hugo. After carefully reading the letter several times and making sure there were no mistakes, Hugo dropped the letter into the mailbox next to the magic school's hall. Unlike Hogwarts, the magic school doesn't have an owl tower because the usable area is very precious. Instead, those lovely messengers are uniformly raised in a building on a reef not far from South Iwo Jima. So, if the students here want to mail letters, they need to write a letter and drop it into the mailbox located on campus, and then the Zashiki Warashi, similar to house elves in the school, will mail these letters out. After mailing the letter, Hugo and Enterprise met in the auditorium and sat down. According to the original competition rules, the end of the second competition should be announced at noon today, and the content of the third competition should be notified in advance. Sure enough, when it was time for lunch, a group of disheartened contestants walked out of the auditorium. Obviously, they should be those contestants who failed to complete the competition. After everyone was seated, the auditorium suddenly became noisy. Whether they passed the competition or not, almost everyone was discussing matters related to the previous competition because Enterprise was by his side. Hugo also used her extraordinary hearing to figure out the main reasons for the failure of this group of losers. Those who were selected to participate in this competition were all elites. No one was eliminated because they couldn't understand the runes on the golden egg, but there was a huge difference between understanding and being able to handle it. For example, a large part of these losers were eliminated because they failed to decipher the complex runes on the surface of the golden eggshell in time. Among the remaining people, some were careless after opening the golden egg and did not check the entire golden egg. So they took the small glass bottle containing the secondary philosopher's stone and went straight out of the front door. The other part of the people discovered the hidden metal container, but were racking their brains because they didn't know how to open it, until the time was up. Of course, the most unique of those who failed to pass the second competition was that Durmstrang student. Although after a series of negotiations, he was at least not sent to a Japanese wizard prison for using dangerous dark magic, but correspondingly, he needs to pay 3 times the amount of the loss to compensate for the loss and atone for his sins. In addition, most of the remaining Durmstrang students were also eliminated. Although their level in alchemy is indeed good, their habit of using dark magic after understanding the meaning of the words on the metal container directly put them on the blacklist. After all, this is an international competition, so you must also pay attention to complying with various laws and regulations during the competition. Although casting the 3 unforgivable curses on people is not a very serious crime, it is by no means something that can be used without restraint. Therefore, these Durmstrang students who are good at using various dark magic spells fell into a big pit here. With the exception of one student, all the other participants from the same school were wiped out. On the contrary, the students of Boksplittens, maybe because they do have enough advantages in this regard, so in this competition, their overall pass rate was second only to Hogwarts. Of course, there is a very important reason for this situation is that there is only one participant from Hogwarts, Hugo, so passing is 100%. And not passing is 0. Not long after everyone arrived, The official from the Federation came out to announce the number of people who passed this competition. Compared with the extremely low elimination rate in the previous competition, this competition eliminated about 60% of the people. Therefore, in the end, including Hugo, only 6 people passed this competition. In addition to Hugo himself, the remaining passers were an alchemist apprentice from Egypt, a Durmstrang student, and 3 Bokspriten students. The next competition will be held in a week and will be a 5-day outdoor competition. After announcing the list of players who had passed the competition, the official from the Federation announced, those who pass the competition will each receive 300 galleons. During this time, you will need to use this money to purchase alchemy raw materials and make various alchemy tools or alchemy potions to prepare for the next competition, and in the subsequent competition, you will need to rely on those alchemy tools you have made to live in the wild for 5 days. Of course, you can use your wands during this process, but using wands to cast spells will affect your score. Unlike the post-match banquet of the previous game, the atmosphere of this post-match banquet seemed a lot more subdued. After all, compared with a previous game, this game eliminated too many people. What should we do next? After finishing their meal as quickly as possible, Hugo and Enterprise walked out of the auditorium together. After all, in a situation where the overall atmosphere is not good, even if Hugo and the others are indeed happy in their hearts, they have to suppress their inner emotions to avoid causing dissatisfaction among others. We can go to nearby Ginza town to buy things. This is the second largest magic commercial district in Japan. After looking at the list that was issued earlier, Enterprise made a decision. I think other people should go there to buy things too. Early the next morning, Hugo and Enterprise arrived at the magic school's pier early. Just like Hogsmeade, Ginza town was also built relying on the magic school. Even because the age of admission to the magic school is 7 years old, the students' needs are even more extensive than similar schools. However, when they arrived at the pier, they were surprised to find that this small pier, which was usually not crowded during holidays, was now full of people. It could be said that almost all of the contestants and accompanying teachers had arrived here. Seeing the bustling pier, Hugo was stunned at first, but quickly figured out the reason. For those who were screened out, the competition is now over, so they just have enough time to purchase some Japanese specialties and appreciate the local customs. And for those who still need to continue the competition, purchasing the items needed for the next competition as soon as possible is also a must. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 224 Kanjumachi. The reason so many people appeared at the magic port at the same time was simply that it was the only place with corresponding transportation to Kinshu Town. Although the Japanese magic community has been learning from the West, such as directly adopting the creation and usage of wands, and even introducing some Western magic as part of the curriculum, it still retains its own unique characteristics in many areas. For example, compared to the flu network, which is very common in Europe and America, only a very small number of areas in Japan have something similar as a symbol of learning from the Western magic world, while for most wizards, the most common method of travel is still the traditional way. Kinshu Town is located on a small island more than 30 nautical miles away, and for safety reasons, there are no similar facilities connecting it, so the only way to get there is by other means of transportation. Considering the large number of people, the magic port did not let them use the giant petrols unique to the school, but instead used the cart boats that are usually used for collective student transportation. The cart boat looks like a Japanese cart streamer, like a giant cart lying horizontally beside the pier inside the mountain. Under the guidance of the local staff, Hugo and the others stepped onto the boat via a gangplank. After entering the cabin, Hugo immediately realized that the boat was not as simple as it looked on the outside, but a rare alchemical item because the boat looks like a small boat, only a dozen meters long and about 3 meters wide, but the cabin has a very spacious space, even enough to fit 2 large buses. This is pretty well done, Enterprise said, entering the cabin behind Hugo, looking around the space. At least it feels a lot more luxurious than the Hogwarts Express, because the entire cabin space was decorated into a Japanese-style tea room, and unlike the tea rooms that mainly focus on elegant style, almost everything in this tea room was covered with the gold leaf, making it look dazzling. This thing is a bit like Hideyoshi Toyotomi's tea room in Osaka back in the day. Enterprise, who has a lot of research on Japanese culture, recognized the original form of this tea room after a few seconds of silence. Yes, Miss Halsey, A Japanese volunteer accompanying her bowed to Enterprise and said, "Our boat is decorated in the style of General Toyotomi's Golden Tea Room." This little episode did not affect everyone's journey. Soon, everyone entered the cabin and sat down in their respective seats, and then the boat started. A very good alchemical tool. There were not many hidden techniques on the various alchemical arrays inside the boat, so after it started, Hugo saw the principle of the entire boat's operation. However, the time left for him to observe these things was not much, because the boat was very fast. In just half an hour, the boat crossed the distance of more than 30 nautical miles and docked at the pier of Kinshu Town. "Don't worry, I have recorded all the visible parts of the ship," Enterprise said to Hugo through the Admiral network when disembarking, "and these things have been uploaded into the Admiral network. I believe that with just a little time, Unyielding and the others will be able to deduce most of the structure." The word maki in Japanese means market, and the fact that it can be named after gold and pearls is enough to illustrate the money-sucking level of this wizard market. Looking inward from the entrance of the market, you can only see a sea of people like the Magic Port or Hogwarts Castle. This island is also entirely hidden under a series of protective magic. And the nodes of the entire magic system are on the 8 towers surrounding the island. Of course, this has nothing to do with Hugo now. Now he and Enterprise are walking hand in hand on the street, and each of them is holding freshly bought grilled rice cakes. Whether it is the wizarding world or the ordinary human world, as long as it is not explicitly prohibited, there will always be various places selling food and places with markets, and Kinshu Town is naturally no exception. "I just saw that the other contestants seem to have gone to buy things," Hugo said while eating the grilled rice cake. "But what does that have to do with you?" Enterprise looked down at Hugo and said, "Anyway, you don't need any precious materials to prepare those things you want, and it's almost impossible for them to be bought out." "You're right. I was just a little anxious after seeing everyone else go." After being said this by Enterprise, Hugo also realized that he had just been led astray by others. After realizing this, he quickly found a place that others could not see and used the avatar to transform into an Asian male, and then he and Enterprise, who had transformed into an East Asian female after drinking Polyjuice potion, continued to wander around the street. People with their European and American appearance are too obvious on the street, so it is easy to attract some unnecessary attention when shopping. So it is more convenient to disguise themselves and blend into the locals when shopping, perhaps because the amateur life of wizards in any country is relatively boring. The wizard alchemy competition currently being held by the Magic Port has naturally become a hot topic in the market. Maybe these people are too embarrassed to discuss this issue in front of the contestants, but after Hugo and Enterprise disguised themselves as locals, they found that 8 out of 10 people chatting were discussing this competition. Among these people discussing the competition, many people are now scolding the Japanese team, because they bet that the Japanese team would be able to qualify in the second game. But they did not expect to be completely wiped out. You need to know that, out of a kind of preferential treatment to the host, the Japanese team had 5 places in this competition that could directly enter the second round of the exam. Therefore, many people felt that although the probability of winning the championship in the end was not high, at least some people should be able to qualify for the second game, so they bet on several odds in the hope of earning some pocket money. But now, they have obviously lost a lot of money. As for the reason for this problem, it is also very simple, because the topic of the second game exam is purely based on the alchemy system of the Mediterranean region. In this way, the Japanese are obviously at a disadvantage in the competition because in alchemy, the foundation of the Japanese wizarding world is still based on the inheritance of that ancient country west of the sea, so it can be said that it is incompatible with the Mediterranean system, adding a bit of obstacle in solving problems. But then again, the unique knowledge that Japanese wizards have summed up over the long years is not without its merits. If it is really a Japanese-style alchemy master, he can naturally find another way to solve this problem. But now, the worst thing is that there is a tendency in the Japanese wizarding world to blindly learn from European and American wizards, resulting in them almost doing in various teachings. Although according to family inheritance, they also mastered some traditional alchemy. But as soon as they saw that this was a question of Western structural system, they got into debt, and so the young wizards abandoned the traditional alchemy they had mastered and tried to solve these problems with the Western alchemy they had learned. However, because of the differences between cultural systems, Japanese wizards are only limited to the study of standard textbooks for Western alchemy. Obviously, this level of knowledge is definitely not enough when facing this kind of high-level competition. Chapter 225 White Robe Society. What's this White Robe Society? After mingling in the crowd and listening for a while, Hugo became interested in a word that those people kept repeating, because these people who lost money, besides criticizing the Magic Association and those alchemists for cultivating a bunch of useless disciples, repeatedly mentioned that if members of the White Robe Society could participate in the competition, they would definitely be able to defeat those European devils. Hugo didn't feel anything was wrong with the other party using derogatory terms like devils to describe Westerners. After all, their losing money could be said to be closely related to these Westerners. However, it was a bit strange that they repeatedly mentioned that the White Robe Society's wizards could easily defeat Western opponents, but no so-called White Robe Society members appeared in the competition. White Robe Society. White Robe. Enterprise repeatedly muttered these two words, while revealing a thoughtful expression. I probably have a guess in this regard. Unlike ordinary wizard school students who have to spend money every year to buy school uniforms, Japanese wizards are uniformly issued a magic robe that can automatically adjust its size as the wearer grows. In addition to adjusting the size, this robe can also change color as the wearer's knowledge increases. When they first enter school, these robes are all cherry blossom-like light pink, and in the end, when wizards can get the best grades in all magic subjects, then it can turn gold. However, in addition to this change, there is also a worse change called whitening, which means that the robes of wizards who violate laws and regulations will turn white. The so-called White Robe Society may be an organization composed of criminals among those wizards, Enterprise analyzed after briefly describing this characteristic of the Japanese wizarding world. However, the one thing I don't understand is, if it's really like I guessed, then why don't these local wizards show any disgust towards the White Robe Society, but instead, you can hear a faint support in their tone. With this question in mind, the two entered a Japanese-style pub. Like the Muggle world, Japanese wizards also prefer to spend time in pubs after work. In this case, Hugo and Enterprise only spent about half an hour and the equivalent of 5 sickles worth of beer to successfully find out what this so-called White Robe Society was from the mouths of those middle-aged men. Just like Enterprise guessed, this White Robe Society is indeed a special organization established by a group of criminals. However, this organization does not want all criminals, but only accepts wizards who have mastered traditional magic. At the same time, in terms of crimes, they basically do not accept those who have committed serious criminal offenses, but accept those who have violated the Secrecy Act for some reason, but have not committed obvious evil. As for why they are popular among the people, the reason is very simple. That is because this organization holds high the banner of Japan first. For example, they believe that the main problem with Japanese wizards now is that they are learning from foreign countries across the board. As long as they can drive out all the foreign influences, everything will be fine. Of course, this kind of blind xenophobia is a very stupid approach, but for the entire Japanese wizarding world, it is a saying that is secretly recognized from top to bottom because, compared to reforming the existing Japanese wizarding world as a whole, attributing all the problems to foreign countries is obviously a simpler and more stable approach, a kind of Japanese craftsmanship spirit. Enterprise curled her lips with a look of disdain after hearing this news. Being able to persist in some inappropriate or stupid views for decades, and never willing to change. In fact, a series of problems did occur in the Japanese wizarding world during foreign exchanges, but those problems only lasted for a very short period of time when the two sides began to contact each other. However, even though those collisions due to different cultures at the beginning have disappeared, this xenophobic atmosphere has been passed down and has even become a target in today's Japanese wizarding society, specially erected to vent various dissatisfaction in reality. In addition to this, they also heard a piece of news related to themselves. That is, there is a rumor circulating in the pub that members of the White Robe Society will make some big moves in this competition to make the Japanese Ministry of Magic feel their power. At the beginning, both Hugo and Enterprise only regarded this as some kind of boasting. After all, for this kind of extremist organization, it is difficult to establish enough appeal if they cannot brag. But when they went to buy all kinds of alchemy items to be used in the next game, they found that this rumor might not just be a rumor, because those things they wanted to buy had all increased in price. What Hugo wanted to buy were relatively common alchemical raw materials, so he directly asked the clerk in the store why these commonly used items would suddenly increase in price. This is mainly because the purchase price has increased a lot recently, the short-haired female clerk said helplessly. So in this case, we can only increase the price, otherwise, the store will lose money. I see. Hugo nodded, and then asked, then, are there any activities here recently that would cause such a big fluctuation in prices? I also find this a bit strange. The clerk frowned at this time. This price increase is mainly due to the supply of goods falling short of demand, but there are indeed no major events in Japan recently that require the use of these materials. This, Hugo and Enterprise quickly exchanged glances, because this consumption was obviously a bit abnormal, and even in Enterprise's view, it was very similar to the behavior of stockpiling materials before the war. But before they had time to say anything, they heard a commotion outside, and vaguely heard shouts like the White Robe Society is here to kill the American and British devils. But soon, all the riots subsided. Then Hugo and the two saw several people in uniforms, who should be staff members of the Japanese Ministry of Magic, escorting two wizards wearing white robes from the street in front of the door. Yoriki and Doshin have caught a few more White Robe Society guys. To be honest, although those guys keep saying that they want to make Japan great again, it's always us merchants who get hurt. Yoriki and Doshin are equivalent to the Aurors and Hot Wizards of the Ministry of Magic in European countries, and from the sporadic voices coming from the street just now, so after they escorted the prisoners away, Hugo and Enterprise, who had bought their things, mixed into the crowd watching the excitement outside the store, and inquired about what happened just now. Just now, that White Robe Society wizard seemed to be attacking a European. As a result, he was blocked by that European. After hearing Hugo ask about this topic like a melon-eating crowd, the people around him quickly talked about what happened just now, one after another. Soon, Hugo and Enterprise had a good understanding of the situation on the field before. End of this chapter. Thank you so much for reading until the end. Don't forget to give it a like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription or donation encourages us to continue. Thank you all. See you in the next video.